Testing.
We will start the meeting in 1 minute. On va commencer la réunion dans 1 minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue à la réunion de la Comité de finances et de développement économique pour le 28 juin 2022. Do we have quorum, Madam Coordinator?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, before we proceed, I'll do a quick roll call of members. Conseiller Cloutier.
Présent.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower. Councillor Hubley, I know is going to be a few minutes late. Councillor Luloff, it's going to be a moment or two as well. Councillor Moffat. Councillor Tierney. I see Councillor Gower now. Vice Chair Dudas.
Easy.
Declarations of interest, déclaration d'intérêt. Confirmation of minutes, minutes 40 June 7th, process verbal 40 le 7 juin 2022. Carried. Communications, sponsor inquiries as presented. We'll go to presentation by Invest Ottawa. We'll come back to that one. Stage 2 LRT contingency funding, fonds de prévoyance de l'étape 2 de projet de train léger. Carried.
Hold, please.
Office of the City Clerk, status update, Finance and Economic Development Committee inquiries and motions received.
Received.
Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development, Property Acquisition 4095 Moody Drive, Nepean. Parcel proposed to expand leaf and yard waste facility. Ward Councillor in support. Carried.
Carried. Carried.
Item 5, City of Ottawa leasing policy, politique de location à bail de la Ville d'Ottawa. A report based on audit recommendations.
I
Karen?
just have a question.
Is it a quick one or should we come back, Councillor?
I think it's a quick one.
Okay, go ahead.
On page 5 of the policy, it indicates that the options for what the decision making by staff, the word is may include, and then list the options. Is everybody there? May include a public call for bids via tender proposal, marketing by Creo, using a realtor, or negotiating directly. Does that mean it may not include those?
Who from staff can answer that? Steve Willis.
I believe we just had him in the waiting room, Mr. Mayor. He is joining now.
So we're looking for Steve Willis. Here he is. Steve, did you catch Councillor Curry's question?
I did, thanks. Mr. Mayor, it all depends on the nature of the facility. Some facilities lend themselves to public offerings better than others, so staff wanted a bit of discretion to work with the facilities operations team and Mr. Chenier's group to decide what the appropriate method is, and that's why the policy has been developed the way it is. Some things are highly specialized spaces, and the other ones are a bit more open-ended, the way they're configured.
Okay, but there's no risk that there would be any conflicts. I just was looking at it through that lens. That there will be a process.
Yeah, there will be a process. I mean, the default would likely be some sort of call for expressions of interest when there might be multiple user groups. There are certain situations where we've had, a specialized space that's been used by the main SIM group for many, many years, and there may be it may be appropriate depending on the use of the space for just to work with them in that situation.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hold this one, Mayor Watson.
Yeah, well, if we're gonna have a discussion, we'll come back, okay? Unless yours is quick.
No, I don't think it'll be too quick.
Okay, so we'll come back to that policy. Okay, item 6, Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Plan. We have delegations. Item 7, Brownfield grant application, 1500 Maryville Road. Carried.
Carried.
Item 8, Brownfield grant, Albert and Lion Street North.
Just a quick question on this, Mayor. Don't have to hold it, I don't
Quick
think.
one. Is it a quick?
It's very quick. It's just if staff can just let us know on the brownfield items here, was proof provided in the applications that these wouldn't have been developed anyway for these 3 brownfield applications?
Eric can answer that question really quickly. The current application process does not have that step, but in the renewal of the program that we are working on for the next term of council, we are trying to introduce a step, and we're working through some of the logistical and legal issues about the information right now. But that is part of our intention of the changes in the renewal that we'll bring forward to council next year.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mayor. As you know, I really do think this program needs to change. We need to look at that, especially if these properties are going to be developed anyway. It's a lot of taxpayer money that we are providing to subsidize what is.
If you want to have a discussion on it, we'll have to hold it. So
No, I don't. I just finish the comment just to say we need a much better program next term of council, and the amount of subsidy here is too large for what we're seeing. So I appreciate you allowing the discussion. Thanks.
right. So item 8 carried.
Carried.
Item 9, 1330, 1340, and 1346 Bank Street and 2211 Riverside Drive in Capital Ward. It says ward councillor in support.
That's not a accurate statement. I think you're maybe talking about the next item, Chair.
But here on number 9, Brownfield grant. Well, anyways, you can comment at council. On the report, carried.
Carried.
Item 10, recreation, cultural and facility services, Deschalette building 205 Scholastic Drive update. Carried.
Carried.
Item 11, parkland funding and retention policies.
Hold that one, please.
Information item previously distributed. Councillor Gower, you have a motion on this particular one.
I do. I have a motion to add this to the agenda, and then a motion as well that relates to the IPD.
Okay, so on waiving the rules to allow it, suspending the rules to allow it, carried.
Carried.
And Councillor Gower, do you want to introduce the motion?
I will. The first, therefore, be resolved to just what we've already done. I'm raising this on behalf of Councillor Moffat, who couldn't be here today. Whereas part of the IPD, Kyvan has agreed to pay a developer contribution estimated to be $334,500 plus applicable HST as part of the city's acquisition of the Infrastructure Ontario Corridor lands. And whereas completion of this acquisition will result in the city receiving a net revenue towards general revenues estimated to be $334,500. And whereas the reallocation of the estimated amount in funds from general revenues to the miscellaneous developer contribution account is requested by the Ward 21 councillor. And whereas the funds are to be used for the development of new parks in Ward 21, Rideau Goulburn. Whereas there are new parks currently planned within the Western Development lands, and the intent is to allocate the funds to the planned parks to add amenities for the community. And whereas the breakdown of the amenities and to which parks the funds will be allocated will be determined at a later date and in consultation with city park planners in the local community. Therefore, be it resolved that with respect to the IPD, the Finance and Economic Development Committee recommend to council that council approve the reallocation of the estimated $334,500 relating to the acquisition of the Infrastructure Ontario Corridor lands from general revenues to the miscellaneous developer contribution account for the purpose of the development of new parks in Ward 21.
Okay, so this is supported by staff, I understand, Mr. Willis.
Yes, Mayor.
Anyone have any comment? Councillor El-Shantiri?
A quick question. I know the motion's off the screen now, but in the end, will it therefore be resolved it says the amount, but it doesn't say plus the applicable taxes. So I'm just wondering if that should be added on or not.
Mr.
That's a
Wilson?
good question that I defer to staff to answer whether or not HST should be included in the final resolution.
Or if I can recommend that we sort this out with finance before council, but I do believe taxes are not included because taxes are remitted to the government rather than being available to the city to spend. I believe the motion as written is correct, but if there's a concern, we'll sort it out between now and council.
Okay.
Fair enough. That's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shantiri. So on Councillor Gower's motion, carried.
Carried.
And then, sorry, Councillor Shantiri. Okay.
Florida, it's just said carried. That's all.
Okay. And Councillor Gower, did you say you had a second item on this item?
No, I have later on a notice of motion for the
Okay.
end of the meeting. Thank you.
So we'll come back to that one. Inquiries, we have no written inquiries. And that's it. So we'll go back to the first item we have delegations for. It is item 1, Invest Ottawa, enabling innovation and economic growth within our community. And we have, I believe, a presentation by Michael Tremblay, President and CEO, and Sonia Shori, VP Strategy, Marketing, and Communications. And as you may know, Invest Ottawa just celebrated its 10th anniversary this month and the 5th anniversary of the Innovation Center. So we had a very good turnout last week of, I know Councillor Curry was there to celebrate the successes of our economic development partner. So if I see Michael on the screen, I see Sonia. Is Michael coming, Sonia, as well?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. My screen seems to have been stopped. I think it needs to be re-engaged.
Okay, so we'll,
by the host.
Carol, can you help us out, please?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Great.
I have some of the fastest networks here today at AreaX.0. So we're running 500 megabytes here in the facility. So, you know, autonomous cars need that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. Let me open up by first thanking Finance and Economic Development Committee for supporting our company, now 10 years old, with our mission to provide economic development services to our community. Given world events, I don't think economic development has been ever been more important than it is right now. We're grateful for today's opportunity to provide you with an Invest Ottawa update as an information item. Your ongoing core funding support is multiplied many times over by other government and industry stakeholders who care deeply about the wealth and prosperity of Canada's capital region, as we all do. From these combined investments, we can provide a wide variety of high impact programs and services for the clients that we serve. Given the limited time, Sonia and I decided to put together a video that would be more of a voice of the customer for you to really hear about the services through their words, which we think is critically important. We've just launched a strategic planning process to build on the progress we've made by listening to the market and preparing for the future as a market catalyst for our region. As deeply difficult as the last few years have been, I'm quite encouraged by how collaborative and supportive our region has been through this period. And I believe that our very best days are ahead because I do believe that the world needs Ottawa. So I'm going to share a video right now following our presentation. Sonia will say a few words as well for some additional insights, and then we'll open for any questions that you may have. So let me
so we're going to
yes.
Get the video up in just a moment.
I'm going to just take care of that on my end. Okay, just take 1 second. We did test this earlier, so I think we're good. There it is. Hopefully you can see the screen showing up. Sound okay?
Invest Ottawa is a market catalyst. We help to amp up everyone around us for the better economic good of our region. That's what we do. The best feedback we get is best served up by the clients themselves.
Invest Ottawa is knowledgeable,
connected, supportive,
people first,
great ally,
friendly and helpful,
change makers, welcoming and so passionate,
engaged, cared about our objectives. Invest Ottawa is here when we need them.
Invest Ottawa is way more than you think it is.
Invest Ottawa has been a great partner to Field Effect. I think specifically when we think about the ENPS survey.
We put so much time into customer experience, customer support, and the ENPS score has been a really big part of that.
As a global company and investor, it is important for us to have a local partner right here in Ottawa that helps us navigate the local government and become a good member of the local business community.
One very tangible thing where we've worked together with a course to accelerate companies for product development. And several of those companies have gone on to be very successful in the Ottawa area.
We were encouraged to experiment a lot, and that was one of the keys that helped us grow 400% in our second or third year of business. And from then, we've raised upwards of $90 million Canadian. Having that seed funding that was available for when the product was really just an idea was instrumental.
The reason why we're happy with the accelerator is because they told us everything we didn't want to hear, but that we needed to hear. We were able to grow the team, grow the marketing, and get ready for that first sale that's just around the corner.
Since we've partaken in the program, we've grown 100-fold, and I'm talking technically in terms of number of transactions, number of clients. It's between 100 and several hundreds times bigger. We were able to do that without hesitation, thanks to what we've seen part of the NGNP.
I needed some guidance on launching the product and making my business plan solid.
Digital Main Street was instrumental in helping me with my transition of my brand. They helped me in terms of my graphics, my social media, connecting it in terms of the wording and my copywriting that was on my website, and helped me to put that all together so that I can relaunch a brand new brand that will help me to engage and connect with my customers.
The best part about collaborating with Invest Ottawa is that as an entrepreneur myself, entrepreneurship is very lonely, but collaborating with Invest Ottawa, it always feels that I have somebody that I can rely on and an ecosystem that I can be a part of.
The objectives we're pursuing together have never been more important. We all know the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women, particularly those from marginalized communities. This is an issue that impacts all of us, our economy, our society, and our community.
One of the many goals we're trying to accomplish here at Invest Ottawa is to disrupt the narrative that exists for so many entrepreneurs from underrepresented and underserved communities, ensuring that all people see themselves in entrepreneurship and consider it not just as a means of survival, but as an economically viable path to take and be supported along.
Because this event is in person and virtually, women have an opportunity to meet one another, not only here in Ottawa, but across the country as well.
We actually first learned about Invest Ottawa through the She Boot program. So this is a program that helps women entrepreneurs become investor ready. We were able to meet a lot of mentors and advisors throughout this program. And now we're connected to their Flex program, where we still get to take advantage of some of the resources and mentors that Invest Ottawa provides.
What She Boot really helped us with was honing our pitch and really pulling out the essence of what was important versus some of the other parts that maybe weren't as important. So that was a really big one. And then really going one-on-one with our mentors.
Invest Ottawa has really supported us through our fundraising process. We use their market research insights team at the beginning to vet options for investors that might be a good fit. So they've really been monumental in making that fundraising process as smooth and efficient for us as possible.
One of the really great and unique things that Invest Ottawa brings to Telesat is Area X.0. And whether it's testing 5G applications, autonomous vehicles, or letting us future-proof, it really is a differentiator. And given Ottawa as a capital of telecom around the world, it couldn't be a better fit.
To move to Area XO was really a simple choice, and it's paid us off in dividends.
We've had a long-standing relationship here with Invest Ottawa and Area X.0.
We brought forward, the 4G to 5G. We're seeing now solutions being brought forward with smart agriculture, some of the smart city capabilities.
Several years ago, we were looking at expanding out some R&D testing, some software development, and we were able to stumble across Area X.0. This has been a great decision. It's been a great collaboration as well with the other companies and, of course, Invest Ottawa.
To have an opportunity to collaborate with such a great organization as Invest Ottawa at their Area X.0 site is just fantastic. We're there at the beginning. We get to learn with them. We get to learn with their other partners and collaborators. It's phenomenal.
Everything from office space to garage space to communication towers to roads to pedestrian crossings to roundabouts, railway crossings, literally a mini city. And that's exactly what we need to be able to do this kind of testing and bring these vehicles from concept and prototypes to reality. They're great to work with. They really are.
Being a part of the site here has really opened us up to a world of opportunities, and the staff in particular has taken the time to connect us with not only companies locally, but globally.
With a diverse set of people coming together at the table to discuss and share about existing challenges and problems, I truly believe that we can get the best out of everyone and the best for the world.
Being in the On-Call program, being in the Area X, so gives you access to all these things so that you can build without, being restricted to, how much do we have? What can we do? What can we buy? Without this, we will not be able to test our systems.
Invest Ottawa has sponsored us as part of the Global Talent Streams to help us immigrate new candidates to Ottawa. Tapping into the international talent has been key for us.
Have Talent is about the future. It's about future opportunities, and such individuals should not limit themselves.
Being here, hearing the person actually speaking, seeing the facility, it's a whole different idea altogether.
I want to try something new and start a new life. There's just so many opportunities here in Ottawa.
Ottawa has been such an incredible place for our business as we're really close to key government decision makers. So we've been able to attend a variety of different roundtables with government officials, with city councilors, and be able to learn behind the scenes what's happening in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So that's been really exciting to be a part of some of those key decision opportunities.
If you're starting a company today, I think what you need to do is, no matter what stage of growth you are, you need to check out what Invest Ottawa has to offer, because there's something for everyone. And with that support, you'll go much further, much faster.
The reason we've been successful as a company is we do this collaboratively with our partners and stakeholders in the region and the funders that really care about economic development across Canada, where Ottawa plays a vital role. With that, on behalf of our community, thank you.
That was great, Michael. It's great to have those testimonials from people who have benefited from Invest Ottawa and the Innovation Center. So back to you and Sonia.
We are incredibly
please go ahead, Sonia. Yeah.
Incredibly grateful, Mr. Mayor, to all of City Council. You are our funders. You are our key municipal partners. That video, all of those testimonials, and the success that we are achieving together is your success. We are a community, and everything we do in collaboration together with you, our partners, our funders, our clients, our directors, our employees, and everyone in our community. We truly harness the power of community through visionary collaboration every single day, and we're grateful that you give us the opportunity to do this. This video is a testament to our collective resilience, growth, and impact during one of the most challenging times in our history. And as Michael said earlier, our greatest days are ahead. As we approach the conclusion of our current 5-year strategic plan, we're excited to collaborate with all of you on the refresh that we will undertake to help Ottawa fulfill its potential as an innovative, future-ready, inclusive global tech hub founded on a quality of life that is second to none, with small businesses in every corner of our city that help us to create that. Today, you heard from individuals who are deeply impacted by what we are doing together. When we roll that up and we look at the big picture, we have shared with you our economic impact report. So since 2012, we've been privileged to work with thousands of startups, scale-ups, and SMEs, help companies to attract almost $1 billion in capital, contribute to the creation of more than 11,000 jobs, and attract more than $1 billion in domestic and foreign direct investment. We're committed to driving an inclusive economic recovery that enables people from every single walk of life to fuel the growth of our economy, to contribute to our society, and build our community. And we want to do this together with you. We're very, very grateful, and we are happy to take any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. We have questions from Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you so much, Sonia and Ian, for being here. This is incredible work that you've accomplished, and I know the difficulties you faced, even getting to this point throughout the pandemic and the pressures that's been put on our local economy and on the work you do. I don't mean to be a bit of
We lost you, Councillor Dudas.
Sorry, Councillor Dudas. Sorry, Laura, we just lost you there. You just froze.
Oh, no.
20 seconds. So.
Sorry. Okay. So if I'll turn my camera off. Maybe that's it. Wonderful. Hopefully that helps. You won't get to see my expressive face though. But no, what I was going to ask is, we know that the cost to do business is increasing. And I know how much work Invest Ottawa puts into future-proofing our local entrepreneurs, or SMEs, all of these startups. What are you doing right now to look towards additional pressures that these businesses are going to be facing with, we've heard the word potentially a recession or things like that. Are you looking towards that with preparing them for the next coming years?
Let me offer a couple of comments, and then if Sonia has some additional thoughts. Part of what we need to do right now is to, having come through 2 years of very difficult program delivery, just given the pandemic and everything happening, we've decided to do strategic plan refresh work to make sure that we can really tighten up the areas of focus that we have for the highest possible impact. We know that small businesses have been heavily affected. I think that Invest Ottawa can play a significant role there, but we want to do it in collaboration with others, like the Board of Trade, like the BIAs that we actually did a lot of work with the Downtown Ottawa Business Relief Fund and Digital Main Street. So we need to do that in cooperation. We'll have that plan completed for the most part by the end of October. It's just kicked off this past week with our board. And I think that that'll inform where we spend our time to ensure that we're delivering in the right areas. Sonia, anything you would add to that?
If we bring it down to action we're taking now that leads up to that strategic plan refresh, which is critical, we stay very, very close to our clients. So our venture development team consistently surveys, works directly with those client companies to better understand the challenges they're facing right now. Throughout the last 2.5 years, we've pivoted consistently and refined the type of advisory services, support, education, and training that we provide to meet needs they were experiencing during the pandemic. We will continue to do that throughout the coming months, should there be a recession, and certainly programs such as SheBoot, which thankfully we are scaling with greater support with NRC IRAP, is allowing us to look at some of the capital challenges that women in particular are facing and continuing to grow. In fact, we're just about to announce that there are 30 women investors contributing $10,000 each. It'll be the first time we've had $300,000 available in capital to support those founders as part of the pitch competition. To date, that program has helped them to generate follow-on investment exceeding $11 million. So another just snapshot of the types of steps we're taking now on the ground that will help us to have greater insight into the strategic planning to position for that next 5 years, all the bumps, twists, and turns that we are so accustomed now, frankly, to working through on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing that, because I know that running a business is a risk-taking adventure at the best of times, and then faced with all of these external pressures. So I'm grateful to hear that, because once again, these businesses, if they're strong, our entire economy as a city is strong. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent.
Great, thank you, Councillor Dudas. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of years ago, or maybe longer, we've all lost track of time, of course. Invest Ottawa announced a fairly sophisticated talent attraction strategy. Can I get some color on how that's going? Because one of the things that we've learned is that the labor shortage is particularly acute, even more so than when you made that announcement a few years ago. How is that going?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, that's become a fairly active part of our business overall. We've been active in it now for about 3 years. We have two streams to it, Councillor. We have one that is focused on international talent recruitment. That has been an enormous effort. We focus on 9 or 10 different tech areas, looking for roles that have at least 5 to 7 years of tenure, so that we can get them engaged. Of course, we also have great STEM production in Ottawa from our post-secondary, so this is incremental to that. And we believe it's incremental to what I would say most of the recruiting firms do. They do a lot more domestic, so we focus our efforts on international. At the moment, we have over 16,000 candidates in our pool. As a result of that effort, it is a heavy lift. The second area of focus that we have is on advanced skills development. We've run 2 programs so far. The first one was connected autonomous vehicle training, which we did last summer for MLTSD provincial department. It was highly successful. We had 11 different programs that we ran, all industry led. We facilitated. You saw some of the video coverage just a moment ago. We just completed another one that was for advanced skills training, also for MLTSD, which was a broader array of training. An example would be with the Ottawa Hospital and a new platform that they're using to drive innovation called MD Clone. That was extremely successful. The feedback has been great. What we need to do next on that is to make sure that we're doing this in good collaboration with post-secondaries and other training partners to make sure that our focus area is unique and that we're doing things that otherwise would not be done. So in other words, unmet needs. So that's what our focus is right now.
The only 2 things I might add to that is we leverage the unique assets, technologies, and experts around us, including those at Area X.0 that would typically never be within the reach of those candidates that are upskilling, reskilling, and in some cases, even the companies that are developing talent from within. And we do everything with a diversity, inclusion, and equity lens. So we've developed a strategy at Invest Ottawa. We've actually delivered some best practices that we're now sharing with others across the region and across Canada, because they're recognized as being able to help deliver the kind of impact and broaden the diversity from priority equity groups that are participating in programs like this here in the city of Ottawa, and the talent that we're attracting in from across the world.
I've been very appreciative as somebody watching Invest Ottawa of the very mindful way in which you're approaching that equity, inclusion, and diversity. So thank you for that. It shows, and I do appreciate it. Do we have more internationally educated professionals in Ottawa as a result of your effort? It's obviously great to have that 16,000 candidate pool, but you know what matters is how many of them are in town and contributing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what the actual number is. It's within a few hundred. So we've actually had some pretty good progress on it. When you think of a pool of 16,000 plus and only a couple hundred landing, it sounds like a small number, but it's a lot of work. It's an immense amount of work. There's immigration issues you've got to deal with. There's just a wide variety of issues. But we've learned a lot, and we've got really good momentum on it. So I would say that that's a pretty good outcome at this point, and I know we can do more.
Yeah, if it's in the hundreds, that's a great start. We need to do better, but that is absolutely a great start. Mayor, thank you very much. Mike, Sonia, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Curry, please.
Very similar question to Councillor Leeper, because in Canada North, the Discover Tech Nata event and then the Discover Tech Nata website is one that I keep sending people to. I mean, on LinkedIn, I sent out 50 job opportunities every day. Ivan Rose at Pinecrest Queensway, we keep sending them out. Would you say that there's, because when you look at the map you put up there and you see it's not just Canada North, it's all across Ottawa, and that is such a wonderful thing to see. And that I understand Invest Ottawa, that was a big part of it. So it's not just Canada North, it's everywhere. And people want to know that because maybe they don't want to live in Canada North, or maybe they can't get transportation out to Canada North, March Road, whatever it is. Is there one central place? I mean, if we were all as councillors sending out these jobs and to every organization, but is there one central place? Because Canada, we're talking 30,000 jobs are available.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I would say on that is we've been evaluating a couple of what I would say world-class approaches to this. One is in Copenhagen. They've got an incredibly strong approach. And the other is right here in Canada. Talent Montreal has got a very sophisticated approach in order to actually connect job seekers with employers, and it's by a wide variety of industries. It's very self-serve. It's part of Montreal International, but they've spun out the website calling it Talent Montreal. If you look at it, it's a very immersive website. Where I think we can go as a community is to pull our resources together, to pool them towards having something that's more of a centralized approach. Now, if I look at the Talent Montreal example, they have almost 30 people that are in there. So we have some strat work to do. We don't have, for example, immigration lawyers on staff. And if you think about the war on talent that's happening, we need to think about how far we are prepared to go to take that number that we were talking about earlier of a few hundred that we land to a few thousand that we should be aspiring to. And so the thing that I worry about as a leader is we also have a recession headwind coming. So as buoyant as markets have been for quite some time, you know, really since 2008 and when the financial crisis came and went, markets have been awfully good. We have to be conscious of what's ahead to make sure we don't overbuild given what's coming. So I think our strat planning refresh piece, one of the streams we're working on is a talent stream, so that we can actually have a good, deep discussion with our partners to figure out how best to configure this going forward. We don't have to do everything at Invest Ottawa. We just need to make sure it gets done.
I would encourage everyone to take a peek at workinottawa.ca as well. Yep. So Councillor Curry, we work so closely with the team at Canada North Business Association and others across the region. All jobs are captured there as well from that citywide view, and it shares success stories, data, insights on the great quality of life in Ottawa that all the businesses that we collectively support contribute to. So workinottawa.ca.
Super, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I appreciate the focus on the gender lens and women starting up. I just wanted to find out, what do you find is the most difficult for women entrepreneurs? There's probably a lot of factors, but what should be done better to help them? And particularly those in low-income areas. I find that when there's a lot of talented women there and well-educated, but there's a gap in terms of connectivity to sources. So I'm wondering what could be helpful to them.
Some of the key challenges.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Some of the key challenges that we've observed, and we've been tracking a lot of research over the last 3 years: access to networks, the right mentors and advisors with the right type of expertise and the right approaches that are most conducive to women who are building businesses, and access to capital. And that access to capital challenge is why, together with the Capital Angel Network, 50 women mentors and advisors from across our region who volunteer their time have created She Boot, which is an investment ready boot camp that essentially equips women to become more investment ready at those earliest stages of development. And it's proven dividends because of the 11 million we've seen in follow-on investment from the 19 women that have already been through the She Boot program that are now scaling companies to that next level. We're currently recruiting our next cohort of 15 women founders, and we do have that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens where we are consistently looking to go out into the community, work with and advocate for women to apply. Don't count yourself out if She Boot isn't the right program for you, in addition to other services programs that we offer in our Small Business Enterprise Center if you're non-tech, and in our Venture Path if you are tech, or other partners across the region or even across the country that can support in different ways. We broker those connections. We commit no woman is left behind. We do everything in our power to connect them with the right resources, mentors, and opportunities to the best of our ability. If She Boot or one of our programs is not an ideal fit for any reason, it's a big mountain to climb. We're in this for the long haul. We're in year 4, and it's founded on a strategy and a subcommittee of our board that I'm privileged to lead to drive forward on those goals. And we report on them every International Women's Week annually at our Launch Factor event.
Well, thank you. I'm wondering about, I meet a lot of really smart people who live in Ottawa community housing, and I'm wondering particularly about helping them. They're usually female-led households which is the reason that they're behind, because they're looking after a family. And so I just wonder what could be done in those cases.
The pandemic certainly has been challenging for us to work on the ground in the typical way that we previously have. We've pivoted everything online during those times to be safe. Now we are getting back out into the community, hosting events at Bayview Yards, all of which 9 times out of 10 are free unless there is a partner that is hosting that event and we're supporting. We also go out into the community with members of our small business enterprise team and do presentations in locations across the city when it is safe to do so, so that we meet those founders or aspiring entrepreneurs where they are at. So Councillor Kavanagh, I would be pleased to coordinate such a session in your ward if that might be of interest. We're actually getting back excitingly now to that mode of business.
Okay, we can have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Conseil Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, good morning to both Michael and Sonia. Last we saw each other was at the launch of the small business grant program, and on the heels of the occupation. And I want to thank you personally for the quick pivot and the creation of that program, and the ability to get the money into local businesses' accounts. It was such an important program. I'm proud of the work that you do, and thank you for highlighting it through the video and through this session here today. I'm looking ahead and wondering, has there been an effort or a review of some of the governance potential? Like I see really good work at Ottawa Tourism. I see really good work at Ottawa Board of Trade. I know that our university campuses, the mayor has a regular meeting with the presidents and their research environment. So I wonder, I'm not looking, if you don't have it, don't search for an answer, but if you do have it at hand, is there a review or an opportunity to, I don't know if it's grow invest, but really grow the economic development potential within the organizational structures that we have, which often are city or government supported?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We learned a lot actually about what each of our partner organizations do, whether it's tourism, OBOT, a wide variety of economic development players, as a result of Mayor Watson instituting the task force through the pandemic. That was very helpful, actually. And Steve Willis and his team have just kicked off some work to do a broader look at economic development in an orchestrated way. I know that they're looking for a partner to help them facilitate some of that work over the coming months. Between OBOT and Cobia, they've completed their strat plan work recently. We actually participated in some of that work, and we will also include all of them in our own refresh work between now and October. So I think we have all of the right approaches in mind to make sure that we're efficient in this. As a company, I want to make sure our councils here today are clear that it isn't our goal to do everything. In fact, I think for us to do the highest impact work we can do, we do have to make choices. And what I hope we can do is actually coordinate some of the work that we have been doing in a way where others can actually build up their teams and be able to support them. And we just need to go through the discussions to figure out what they are. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that every nickel that goes into economic development is being productive, that we're getting good value for that money, and that there's no overlaps. Where there's overlaps, there's a loss of opportunity for the companies we serve. We need to deal with that. So I think we have good momentum on that. I love the question because we are spending a lot of time on this particular topic, and there is room for optimization, which we are all hungry for because there's always way more to do than we have people to do the work.
The collaboration. I was just going to add, the collaboration between the economic development players in the city has strengthened 100-fold during the pandemic. So that has been a really positive outcome and a foundation for us to build upon. We engage regularly, not just at that strategic level, but at the program level. So International Women's Week, for example, engages 40 organizations from across our region that all collaborate through the lens of their mandate on that big picture goal. That's just one example of many. The Digital Main Street program, the Downtown Downtown Ottawa Business Relief Fund to additional critical examples of how we've driven targeted relief and support into our community in a partnership fashion that had no redundancy, no overlap, and a lot of impact.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the response and the work that's being done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Merci, conseiller. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions? Any other questions? So thank you again, Sonia and Michael and your teams and the board. Great work, and it's good to see that tangible progress that's being made, particularly post-COVID. Our next item that has a delegation is item 6, Ottawa International. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Leap, are you now satisfied with item 5?
I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so on item 5, carried. Okay, next is item 6, Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Plan. We have a staff presentation and then a number of public delegations to speak. So who's going to start us off? Is it Chris?
Actually, I'm just going to introduce it, Mr. Mayor, and then Cindy will be doing the presentation supported by Chris. So good morning. My name is Don Herrera. I'm the Director of Economic Development and Long Range Planning at the city. And as I mentioned, I'm joined by Cindy Van Buskert, the Program Manager for Economic Development Services, and Chris Cope, who's our Economic Development Officer and lead on this file. And we're here to make a very brief presentation on the proposed Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Plan. Could we call up the slide deck, please? Thank you, Chris. Next slide. So as you may know, staff worked on the proposed airport CIP, and it was initiated through the Mayor's Economic Partners Task Force. As you know, in the early days of the pandemic, Mayor Watson brought together several economic development stakeholders, including partners such as Invest Ottawa, who we just heard from, Ottawa Tourism, the Board of Trade, the Ottawa Coalition of BIAs, and many others. And we all shared information on the pandemic impacts and looked for opportunities for collaboration to support small business and the broader local economy. Late last year, the task force raised concerns about the pandemic impacts on the airport and the significance of the airport to the broader economic rebound post-pandemic, as well as longer-term future growth and prosperity. The staff were asked to investigate what opportunities might be available to support the airport's recovery and future growth using financial incentives to stimulate investment and development, increase employment, and reestablish increased direct airline routes, which combined would bring broad economic impacts to the local economy. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Cindy, who will walk you through the balance of the presentation.
Thanks so much, Don. Next slide, please, Chris. So staff determined the best opportunity to support airport rebound and future resiliency, as well as broader economic growth, job creation, and prosperity was a community improvement plan, or CIP. CIP is an economic development tool permitted under the Planning Act that allows a municipality to provide financial incentives directly to property owners to stimulate new development, redevelopment, or other property upgrades. The proposed airport CIP will be self-funded with incentives provided in the form of a tax increment equivalent grant, or a TIG, based on the incremental municipal property tax increase resulting from the increase in property assessment attributable to an eligible project. The city has implemented CIP programs to stimulate investment and encourage urban renewal in commercial areas such as Bell's Corners, Orleans, and Montreal Road. And the city also has a heritage CIP program to support heritage preservation. Next slide. Before describing the proposed airport CIP in more detail, it's important to understand the impact of COVID-19 on airport operations, as well as the significant contribution of the airport to the local economy pre-pandemic. Compared to 2019, passenger volumes at the airport decreased 77% in 2021, a reduction of almost 4 million passenger trips. At the lowest point of the pandemic, the airport lost 21 nonstop routes, leaving only 6 nonstop routes. Combined operating losses in 2020 and 2021 before depreciation were almost $25 million. Because the airport leases their land from the federal government, they participate in the PILT, or Payment in Lieu of Tax program, and remit annual payments to the city based on passenger volumes. As a result of the significant decline in passenger volumes, city revenue from the airport under the PILT program declined by $4 million in 2021. Prior to the pandemic, the airport was generating $2.2 billion in economic output annually and supporting 10,000 jobs, direct jobs, indirect, and induced. For every 10,000 passengers, there were approximately 11.1 direct full-time jobs, and that equates to almost 5,700 direct full-time jobs attributable to airport operations. Next slide. The city's new official plan acknowledges the airport's significance as a vital economic generator and contributor to future economic growth and prosperity by designating it as a special economic district. The new OP estimates that by 2036, the airport precinct has the potential to deliver over $3 billion in economic output annually and support 16,000 jobs. A robust airport rebound and future investment in development is critical to support other parts of the economic development ecosystem, like Ottawa's thriving technology sector and tourism. Accelerating airport recovery will encourage employment growth and leverage our investment in the new LRT with 2 new Trillium Line stations, the Airport Station and Upland Station adjacent to the EY Center, which will be a focus area for future transit-oriented development. The chart on your screen highlights the dramatic impact the pandemic had on Ottawa airport passenger volumes last year, with a 14.1% reduction compared to 2020. Edmonton, Halifax, and Calgary all posted solid increases in 2021, while Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and Winnipeg experienced single-digit declines. Next slide. Staff reviewed the CIP program statutory requirements and confirmed that the city can establish an airport CIP program and provide tax incentives for eligible airport lands being developed or redeveloped, and that the intent of an airport CIP program to support community economic development is permitted under the Planning Act. The program would be available to airport tenants who develop or redevelop sites, terminal or airside, for either aviation or non-aviation uses that result in an uplift to the property tax valuation of the site. As the owner, the airport authority would undertake CIP applications as permitted under the Planning Act, but only tenants paying municipal property taxes would be eligible to receive CIP incentives. To ensure projects under the proposed program are of a significant scope and scale, a minimum increase of $250,000 in property assessment value would be the eligibility threshold. As noted earlier, the airport CIP incentive would be in the form of a tax increment equivalent grant and funded by the uplift in property assessment and resulting increase in municipal property taxes following project completion. Next slide. Grants would be based on 75% of the increase in municipal property taxes each year up to 25 years until the cumulative grant total reaches the lesser of 100% of eligible project costs or $25 million. The remaining 25% of the property tax increase would remain with the city. And here are 2 short examples. In the first example, a project that results in a property assessment increase of $10 million would result in a cumulative CIP grant of $4.2 million paid to the tenant over 25 years. During the same period, the city would collect $1.4 million in incremental property tax. In the second example, a project that results in a property assessment increase of $100 million would result in a cumulative CIP grant of $25 million, which is the maximum grant available, paid to the tenant over 17 years. During the same period, the city would collect almost $10.5 million in incremental property tax. The airport CIP would be in effect for 10 years with a 5-year option to renew at the discretion of council, and all applications under the program would be subject to review and approval by the Finance and Economic Development Committee and council. Grants would be paid on council-approved applications once a project is completed, once MPAC has completed a new property assessment, and the applicant has submitted the first year's taxes in full. Next slide. This map shows the proposed airport CIP boundary in blue. Just wait for that to come up. Maybe go to the next slide. Okay, can you go back one and see if the map pops up? That's very strange. I apologize. I will, you can't see it, but I'll describe it. The boundary that's been established has been established in collaboration with the airport and only includes sites that would currently be available for development in the main operational areas of the airport. So it doesn't include the entire airport campus. I'll just get us to the next slide, slide 9. So the airline industry is highly competitive with airports competing for routes, ancillary uses, and development. Staff anticipate that this program will make the Ottawa airport more competitive with other large municipalities competing for the same opportunities. New investment at the airport will help accelerate the pace of recovery, contribute to a robust economic rebound across the region, and support future growth and job creation. To provide an order of magnitude, there are currently approximately 100 hectares of land available at the airport for development or redevelopment, and that's within the proposed CIP boundary. The airport could realize more than $10 million in incremental revenue or rent should all available sites be developed or improved over time. This revenue can be reinvested in airport operations to grow passenger volumes and air routes. Next slide. The report recommendations before you today are to recommend that Council approve the adoption of a bylaw to designate the area shown in document 1, which is actually in your staff report and is the project area. So as the Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Project Area, and 2, to approve the adoption of a bylaw to create the Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Plan program as set out in document 2, also attached to your staff report. Thank you very much for your time, and I would like to just briefly thank our colleagues in legal and finance for their guidance and assistance in the preparation of this report. Dawn, Chris, and I are available to take your questions.
Great, thank you very much. We have a number of members of the public who have come to have signed up to speak, so we'll hear from them first, and then we'll go back to councillors for questions and comments. So first, back again, Michael Tremblay. I don't think you had to even leave, Michael, from Invest Ottawa. Followed by Mark LaRoche from the airport. Michael Tremblay with us. There he is. Michael, welcome back.
Took a moment there. I disappeared for a moment, Mayor Watson. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. And at the outset, as we have the ambassador from the Israel Embassy visiting here shortly, so I'll say a few words, hopefully incremental to what you just heard from Cindy and Dawn, which I think really helps to frame this quite well. Obviously, pre-pandemic, our airport was in a very good position for continued growth, generating $2.2 billion in total output each year and contributing 10,000 jobs in 2017, if you look at some of those statistics. Air transportation is an extremely important part to the work we do from a foreign direct investment and trade perspective, both in and out. So it's extremely important for the work that we do. Having viable air transport links, it's one of the key considerations that site selectors use when they're looking at site locations. And so the current situation that we have is actually a very difficult one for the business that we're trying to attract to the region. We are getting a lot of feedback on this right now. The lack of air connectivity with clients that are looking at our region. So something that we need to pay careful attention to. When I look at what occurred during the pandemic, our airport authority lost all of its international connections, of course, with American and Delta closing their bases in Ottawa altogether. That's a significant loss for our work here. And if I look at what's occurred with our major domestic carriers, Air Canada and WestJet, they've used the opportunity to heavily fortify their hub and spoke strategy, for which we're relegated as a spoke. It is problematic for our business. Something needs to be done there. Other than sun destinations, Air Canada and WestJet, they do not offer nonstop flights from Ottawa to other international destinations. I am particularly concerned about the loss of Frankfurt and Heathrow Airport. When I consider the opportunity we have with CETA and the importance of Canada actually changing the portfolio and deep dependence on US markets, that is a significant loss for our region in terms of that work. So many of the destinations served as entry points into hubs that would facilitate onward travel to destinations in Europe, the US, and Asia. So some of the losses really do have dire long-range consequences. Couple of quick points that I'll make and then open for any questions you may have. So I think that the connection on this one is one of the most important aspects of our economic development strategy for the region. This is really critical for us. We need to pay very close attention to this particular issue. When I think of the support that we have from the city and the stakeholders to put this back on the map, we need to really band together as a region. I do applaud the approach the city is taking with the CIP proposal. When I look at what other regions are doing, specifically Edmonton and Halifax, $15 million and $20 million investment funds, these are reserve funds that are intended to support the refresh of what we need to do from an air transit perspective. They've done it. We need to do it too. And I think what we have in front of us is something that will take us along the way there. Ladies and gentlemen, really appreciate your consideration on this one. It's critical to the future of the economic development for our region. It's an enabler without a doubt. Thank you.
Great. So questions to Michael, Jeff, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. So I absolutely don't deny the importance of getting our airport back on its feet and establishing the connections. My question, though, these community improvement programs are intended to incent development that might not otherwise take place.
Yeah.
And I am challenged to accept that an incentive program of this scale will actually be the difference that attracts businesses and development to this property, to this area. And in the meantime, we're foregoing tax revenue that is required in the community. I think you've got a big challenge ahead of you before the council vote to demonstrate that this development won't happen anyways as our population grows. The amounts involved are probably too small to make or break a business case for creating a logistics hub on airport property, for instance. I would challenge you before the council meeting to demonstrate more conclusively that we need to forego much needed tax revenue in order to incent development that seems to me will happen based on factors that have nothing to do with taxation. I don't know if you want to start responding today, but that's something I'm going to be looking for before I have a chance to vote on this at our next council meeting.
May I offer a couple of thoughts?
Of course.
And then I actually should run the ambassadors now here. This is one step in a variety of things that we have to do. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to make it an attractive area to invest in, but it also has to have a business case. To your point, Councillor, this is a small amount of money when you think about what is required to actually run an operation as an airline. And so, we have to make sure the demand is there. The business case is very connected to the demand. So what I can, commit to council right now is Invest Ottawa will do everything in our power to work with companies in our region to get them to step up and sign up for demand. Without that, we really don't have a hope. The final point I'll make is This is around being competitive. We are competing with other cities in the country outside of Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto to make sure that we remain relevant as a destination. We need to worry about what the other ones are doing. And we don't want to have any regrets here. This will have a dire long-term effect on the economic development of our region. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words on this. And I do have to run. I appreciate the time very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I did have a follow-up. Mike spoke to reserve funds that are available to incent development in other jurisdictions, and I'm just wondering how those are structured. If Mike has to run, I can wait for that answer, or somebody knows. It implies some kind of direct investment, which strikes me as more effective than a tax increment incentive. But if somebody can get me that information before council, I'd be appreciative.
Yeah, that would be more a question to staff, so they can follow up on that, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Blocking, unfortunately, because he was meeting the Israeli ambassador, he had to leave. So do you have, I guess we'll put you on the list to, if you want to speak to the next speaker, Mr. LaRoche.
Yeah, I may, but I'll have to follow up Mr. Tremblay, who left before I could speak. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So our next speaker is Mark LaRoche, who's President and CEO of the Ottawa International Airport. Mark, welcome. And as some of you may remember, for many years, we at the Ottawa Airport received the best mid-sized airport in, is it North America or the world? So we're very proud of all of the work that's been done, but obviously you're facing some significant challenges that we have to address. So over to you.
Good morning, Mayor Watson, Vice Chair Dudas, and committee members. I'm delighted to be here this morning to express my gratitude for the support the City of Ottawa has extended to the Ottawa Airport Authority and to explain why this initiative is so vital to the airport's recovery. Before the pandemic, YOW served more than 5 million passengers annually, and we were on a growth trajectory with many exciting projects on the books. Most importantly, we were contributing to the economic prosperity of Canada's capital region to the tune of 10,000 jobs and $2.2 billion of economic impact per year. It's no secret that the past 2+ years have been devastating for the authority and for every airline, ground handler, airport tenant, and partner. When I addressed the Mayor's Economic Partners Task Force last December, I described the extent of the impact YOW has experienced since March of 2020. From the abrupt shutdown of 90% of our air capacity, workforce adjustments, and severe financial bleeding, we continue to feel the full weight of COVID-19. We were forced to suspend many projects, but a few progressed, albeit cautiously. The LRT Airport Terminal Station, for example, advanced to meet the city's Stage 2 timelines. Thankfully, we received $6.4 million in federal government funding through the Airport Critical Infrastructure Program. And our commitment to fund the total cost of the station would have been even more challenging if we hadn't received that. The funds covered less than 50% of our costs, but we welcomed the support nonetheless. Despite the challenges, we still firmly believe that we have an incredible opportunity that dovetails perfectly with our collective investment in our world-class transit system that is connecting communities across Ottawa. Transit-oriented development by the EY Centre Station will increase ridership on the airport spur and grow employment in the surrounding area, which will be a win-win-win for the airport, the city, and the community at large. Ultimately, the airport LRT will also help our case for more appropriate levels of air service for our community. I'm pleased to say that since last fall, our passenger volumes are ticking up as airlines have slowly restored their YOW routes. Passenger volumes are approximately 65% of our pre-pandemic levels. We have a way to go to achieve our ultimate goal of beyond 2019 air capacity, as well as financial sustainability. Barring any severe COVID variants, we hope to get there by the end of 2023 or 2024. Furthermore, our longer-term objectives is that more nonstop flights will serve YOW with air travelers choosing to connect to our airport instead of connecting to two close hub airports located east and west of YOW. We believe the CIP could generate important revenues that we could reinvest in attracting more nonstop flights to and from the Ottawa airport. The business of airports is highly competitive. That's why we believe that the proposed CIP will make YOW more competitive for investment. Given the nature of our industry, there are many geographical options for operators and developers to base their services in support of their goal to effectively transport people and goods by air. By no means is YOW a clear choice. In fact, we are at a disadvantage as other jurisdictions directly inject millions of dollars into their airports. We need and appreciate all the help we can get. Our $15 million taxiway Romeo project is an excellent example of how we work with partners to ensure that YOW's critical infrastructure is ready to accommodate development, which in turn help keeps the cost of flying lower. Please rest assured that despite the pandemic's devastation on our industry, we have not lost sight on our community commitment. From our in-house Project Clear Skies initiative, which directly injected more than $1.5 million into charitable projects, to highlighting technology and innovation in the terminal, to supporting major events led by the city and Ottawa tourism, we believe in Ottawa and Canada's capital region. We believe it is the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family. Our mandate is to ensure that our growth and success translates into greater economic prosperity for our community and good jobs for our residents. Thank you for acknowledging the importance of our airport, your airport, and for your help in ensuring both our recovery and success going forward. I'm ready for questions.
Great, thank you very much. And I know you have two colleagues with you as well. So
Yes.
Questions to Mark LaRoche. We'll just go to Councillor Brockington, since you didn't get a chance to answer. Do you want to go first? Riley, are you still there? Okay, we'll go to Jeff then, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, I have the same question for you that I had for from Michelle. The growth in development around the airport is going to be connected to growth in population in Ottawa, the restoration of air links globally. This strikes me as unnecessary foregoing of tax revenue to incent development in amounts that are too small to be the difference between a business choosing to develop land around the airport or not. Can you address why this measure is needed to get development going?
Thank you, Councillor. It is a tool to incentivize development, obviously. And what we're competing against other airports who have developments on site. Typically, cities and provinces, in some case, invest quite a bit in supporting development projects. My main business at the airport is to connect cities. The development of land next to our airport helps us do that. So by improving our development opportunity, which the CIP does, we hope to attract faster and quicker development, which will in turn support our direct mission, which is to connect destinations between Ottawa and other airports.
I just don't see that case made in a convincing way in the staff report that is in front of us. You know, we don't have the hypothetical scenarios in which people find that this amount of money is enough to sway them to develop on this land. I'll say what I said to Michelle, which is before council votes on this, I'm looking for a more rigorous analysis to demonstrate that this will actually make a difference. The problem with tax increment financing like this is that we forego revenues for development that may or may not occur anyways, and that these programs are irrelevant to whether or not the development proceeds. And so I'm really looking before I vote on this at council for a clearer case to be made. It strikes me that there are lots of incentives that could be offered, and real incentives. I'm wondering if you have any idea what Michel was talking about when he mentioned, for example, reserve funds that are available to be tapped into by developers in other jurisdictions like Halifax. He talked about $15–20 million reserve funds. Are you familiar with what some of the other jurisdictions are doing that is making a difference?
Well, some jurisdictions are investing directly with an amount of fund. We call it an air service development fund, and that provides dollars to allow airports to incentivize airlines to bring on new routes. Now, the position that Ottawa is doing that in some indirect way with the CIP. Like, we would welcome an air service development fund, and we'll be working with other stakeholders to get there. But with the CIP, by allowing us to get more non-aeronautical revenue, we can funnel that portion of revenue that we're making to also incentivize in appropriate ways airlines. So the more non-aeronautical revenue that we have, the more I can put to operations and incentives and other programs. So that is the link here. And I do think the case will be made. Obviously, it's made on a case-by-case basis. Projects have to make sense. They will come to council every time. So there'll be an opportunity to make our case on each project. And I think those incentives, when a developer comes to see us, be it a builder, he will look at Ottawa as a more attractive place to bring their hangar or their project that will bring bring jobs to the community. And like any other incentive, any little helps. And this is not an insignificant amount that the city of Ottawa is putting forward.
Okay. I will challenge you to make that case clearly before council. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you. The staff report notes that over time, should all sites be improved, there'd be a $10 million increase in incremental annual land revenue for the airport. I want to try to understand what that means over time, because this plan has a 10-year lifespan plus an option for 5 years. So do you believe that with this incentive or this program, that within 10 or 15 years, all of the land would be improved, or would this be over a longer time period that you would anticipate all of the available sites would be improved?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. It's very hard to forecast development. What we do know is we have 100 hectares of development land, and we've had few opportunities to develop that. And we think with the right tools and the right incentives, and also the right traffic and business community, they will be attracted to these business development lands. You could look at these lands as just another industrial park of the city. We rent the land, and it's land that it's not necessarily required for our direct infrastructure such as runways and taxiways, but it's land that businesses want to be are attracted because it's close to the airport. It's sometimes connected to a taxiway or connected to an airfield, and it's appropriate for their business. And I can demonstrate how competitive airports and incentives are right now. This is the new game. Before, we could stand still and just wait and business would come to us. This is no longer what's happening. Right now, everyone is expecting incentives. Everyone, airlines, developers, and all that. And if you're not there with some form of incentive, you're not even part of the equation right now.
And so actually, I had a briefing from staff on this a few weeks back. And I think my question to them was, is this a sufficient incentive? Is this a meaningful incentive? And I think perhaps Councillor Leeper was getting at this as well. Can you put in context, or perhaps give us a greater idea of what other incentives municipal airports are offering and how this compares and why you believe this program would be a sufficient incentive to attract.
Well, Councillor, again, thank you for that question, and they're good questions. When we went to the task force, the mayor's task force, we had two programs. One was the CIP and one was the Air Service Development Funds. So the Air Service Development Fund would be an additional fund, but we're going to probably have a broader reach with other stakeholders to be part of that. So yeah, I'm not going to say I would not like more funds or more incentives and more tools to attract businesses to the Ottawa, the National Capital Region, and the Ottawa City in particular. But let's start with the CIP and go from there and see the results of the CIP. And I think they'll be positive over time.
So I guess we're being aggressive enough as a city in partnership with the airport to chase after the organizations, the companies, the enterprises who would want to be developing near an airport. This is competitive. This is aggressive. This is putting our best foot forward to attract businesses to our airport economic development area.
Yeah, Councillor Gower, and again, this is a first with the city of Ottawa and the Ottawa Airport working so closely together on an objective of development. So it's a first step. I think it's a very important step, and I'm optimistic with the future of our collaboration. Our success is the city's successes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gower. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lavavash. I'm just trying to understand the timeline, because I guess in reading the report, it was in 2021 through the mayor's task force that this was raised as an issue, and it was raised as an issue, sort of a more direct flights in and out of Ottawa and other potential incentives that could come to the airport. I'm just wondering what other incentives might be available right now to the airport federally, and other economic incentives that maybe exist in terms of direct flights or other items that were mentioned as part of that task force.
Thank you, Councillor. We don't have any incentive programs that are made available to us for development or for route development. We exist on our own revenue collections and our fees. So this is a first. We've asked many times in the past to the province for support. We've not received any. And we've asked the city at various moments and times for additional support. So this is the first time that we've structured a program. We've worked closely with the economic development of the city to make our case and to demonstrate that other airports are receiving support from their city, because all cities see it's a natural thing to do to encourage businesses and development and to have a successful airport. The more connected we are, the more businesses that we attract.
Thank you for that. I think you mentioned nothing's getting developed these days without incentives, and the issue with it, I guess, on the city side is that if we did everything this way, the city would eventually go bankrupt, right? Yeah, that's what would happen if we developed everything with a SIP the way we're talking about. It's a lot of future tax revenue that would be forgoed. And in these cases, I think the important part is we demonstrate that this wouldn't happen otherwise. So I guess in your case, the development potential here, has anything been explored of, is there a plan in place to develop these lands already? Is this kind of an add-on to that? Will you stop the plans to develop other portions of the airport without any incentive from the federal government or the municipality?
Thank you, Councillor. Obviously, we didn't have this tool before, so we can develop a plan around it. If the CIP is approved by the council, and I hope it will be, we will develop a marketing plan to market our land and to indicate that there is a T or a CIP available. And we'll see, let's compare the last 10 years to the next 10 years. And I'm convinced that it will have an impact, because already when people come acquire our land, and they can't acquire, they can only rent. So that's an increased complexity in doing a real estate deal. I can only lease land. So the incentive is, to get someone to look at airport property that's good for his business, and with an incentive, it's going to help for sure.
Thank you. I'll look forward to that discussion before Councilor Leeper has mentioned and others have talked about. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions pour Mr. Rush? Maybe Mark, just when you see the chart that shows Ottawa's airport going down by 14%, which was the largest drop of any major airport, I'm just wondering why that occurred. One reason I suppose is we're so dependent on government, and when MPs aren't traveling, you think of just the MPs alone, that's potentially 300 trips through the airport, and then consultants and lobbyists and so on that come to meet MPs are now meeting via Zoom. Is that one of the reasons why we seem to be hard hit? I know we lost our international travel, but some of these other airports did as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, absolutely. Our main employer has a big impact on it. It's not just the MPs that are not traveling. It's also the bureaucracy, the people that coming to meet the bureaucracy, they can no longer come and meet them in their office. So remote working has a definite impact on especially the business travel. The other thing is, while airlines rebuild, they start off by rebuilding their hubs. We're not a hub. We're a big spoke. We connect a lot to Toronto. We're hoping to change that dynamic. So once we are able to start receiving connecting passengers, you will see some substantial increase in numbers. But right now, the impact of the pandemic is so great, especially with our main employer not traveling very much, and remote working is not conducive to people to come to meet with the bureaucracy for projects or stuff like that, because they're simply not in their offices. So yes, there is a direct link there.
Okay, Councillor Gower is back on.
Yeah, not a question, but a suggestion to both the airport and staff before the council meeting. Perhaps we could get a memo to City Council giving us some comparisons of grants that are available or incentives that are available from other airports at similar mid-sized cities, and perhaps I'm not trying to make this too complicated, but in terms of airport economic zones, some success stories that would be relevant to Ottawa. I think it's one thing that the report isn't super clear on is establishing what kind of a difference this can make in terms of economic development in Ottawa. I'm most interested in some of the comparables, like how this CIP program would compare to other grants that may be available in other airports. But in general, just if there's any information you can point us to in terms of municipal economic development and airport zones, I think that'd be helpful for many of us on council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury.
Mark, I'm just jumping into to the last question from Glenn. You shared with me that the environment across Canada is very different, that in Ontario, based on the provincial government's financial arrangements, that it has some limitations. Because I gave you a couple of examples, Calgary, Quebec City, a little smaller than us, but in some ways very similar. And you said they're very challenging to compare. So I just don't want to set us up for a failure here. Can you maybe share with the group what you shared with me in terms of national comparisons and the provincial complexities?
Certainly. Obviously, municipal tax assessment is a provincial jurisdiction, so every tax assessment decision is based depending on where the airport is. In some provinces, like Ontario, we had our assessment based on the volume of passengers. And just not to confuse the committee, the $1 per passenger that we're going to pay no matter what. The CIP is for the developer who comes and starts a business, the increment. It does not touch the PILT that we pay to the city. Depending on the airport, for example, policing service, we pay 100% for a policing service. We pay the city of Ottawa for the 21 officers that we have at the airport. So we're a low-cost business. Some provinces, it's provided either through RCMP and then there's different fees. So we have to be careful on the comparison on cost. But on programs that are direct for incentives, for example, we will look at North America, not only Canada, because we're competing against airports just across the lines here also, to keep their costs down and to attract new flights. So we will come up with examples of incentives that communities and provinces and states are providing their airports in order to attract business. If you look at Halifax, there's been a whole slew of announcements, for example, of new routes. Those were certainly assisted by funds that were made available from the province. Another airport is Edmonton. They have received funds from the city and from other stakeholders to attract flights. And again, we're looking at tools to compete against those airports because airlines will look at the incentive. So if I'm going to lower my fees, I have to get revenue elsewhere. By increasing my non-aeronautical revenue, I'm going to be able to flow that revenue to supporting my operations and route development.
Thank you, Mark. And unlike the Rideau Center, where we have, it's the property value that gives us a property tax revenue. In your case, it's the 108 per passenger. So can you give a little clearer of where we were at pre-pandemic with the flight levels versus where we're ending up at its lowest range?
So we were approximately $5.5 million in PILT payment. Now we're probably at the lower part, we were almost nil, but we went down to 1.5 million, and we're wrapping up. Each passenger that comes through the airport is a PILT payment to the city. And that's unique in Ontario, because airports negotiated with the city, with the assessment board, to have a formula that was appropriate, that wouldn't be challenged legally and all that. And we came out with a formula that was, prior to my time in the early 90s, sometimes, which said that we're going to base on passenger volume. So Toronto, for example, Mississauga is receiving PILT payments based on their passenger volume, and Ottawa is and other airports in Ontario.
I often think of, I'm a big fan of sports and culture and festivals and so on. And, as a municipal government, beyond pride, it's very hard sometimes to show the economic benefit other than a business benefit to, say, a Main Street or a district. But I think in your case, it's a bit different, because not only is it good for our economy when there are more travelers supporting businesses, as we've heard from Invest Ottawa, but the direct impact on the property tax with the PILT by the passenger volume is a direct link that we want the airport to grow its flights and grow its passenger volume, because it's a direct benefit to us financially. So, but I think, Glenn, it's the right environment, but I think we'll be surprised how incentivized the airport industry is, particularly in the United States, who are a bit different on their approach to economic development. We do have a Canadian DNA, and that's fine, but we do have to be sensitive to our context too. And anyhow, I think the question is the right one to ask. I just think I'm putting a little nuance to the analysis, which might be complex to achieve. But thank you, Glenn, for the question. And Mark, I'll look forward to the analysis. I just wanted to bring, because I had asked similar questions and I was surprised by the challenges of setting out a fair context. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, very much. Our next presenter is Su-Ling Ching, President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade, followed by either Michael Crockett or Catherine Callery from Ottawa Tourism. So Su-Ling, there's Su-Ling right there. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Watson. Thank you, Council. And thank you, Mark, for your presentation. The Board of Trade, as you know, is an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are the voice of business and a key advocate for economic development with a mission to cultivate a thriving world-class business community, one that drives community prosperity and builds up an affordable, inclusive, and sustainable city as our nation's capital. To that end, we are here today to support the creation of the Ottawa International Airport Community Improvement Plan and designate the proposed area identified by senior staff at the city and the airport as most appropriate for this economic development tool to encourage new development, redevelopment, and property upgrades from our tax-paying businesses. The Board of Trade supports pro-growth strategies that attract private sector investment, create employment, and enhance economic development. The Ottawa Airport is a key asset in the National Capital Region and critical component in our ability to grow and reach our full potential. So much so that our Board of Trade, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee hosted an aviation summit in 2019 to increase the understanding of the potential of the airport and create a community conversation on how to support its enhancement, specifically regarding the creation of direct flights. Business leaders have shared that the importance of our airport services for talent attraction, new investment, and the visitor economy is paramount. Some believe it is the most important asset for business growth. Our Tier 1 airport is challenged by its proximity to Montreal and Toronto airports. The entire industry has been decimated by the pandemic, but our airport has persevered and has used this time to lay a strong foundation for elevating its important role in city building. The City of Ottawa attracts global, national, and regional attention as the capital of Canada and a cultural and economic hub. Our collective effort to optimize this unique position is paramount to ensuring a sustainable strategy to grow community prosperity and economic growth. What has worked for Ottawa in the past may not be what we need for the future. We need to consider the impact of our airport not realizing its full potential. Now is the time for us to look for innovative ways to build up our airport product offering and demonstrate that we are open for business in a highly competitive post-pandemic global economy. The city has limited opportunities to incentivize business development. This unique program should be one part of an overall proactive growth strategy by reinvesting new revenues that might not otherwise materialize. Our ability to fully utilize the tools at our disposal and make the decisions today that will generate both economic activity and increased revenue long-term is smart city building. We thank the City of Ottawa, Council, and staff team for your ongoing collaboration. We thank Mark LaRoche and the airport team for your leadership, expertise, and dedication. We gladly offer our assistance to the city and the airport as we work together to build a global iconic city. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Su-Ling. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Well, let me begin by thanking Su-Ling for all her effort through the pandemic and with her leadership at the Ottawa Port of Trade. Su-Ling, you remember some of this discussion took place before even the pandemic, when we find out some of the educational institution, university and colleges, they were also in a way losing to Montreal and Toronto, and one of the reasons for the international student, because in one upon a time, Ottawa used to receive a large number of international students. So, I mean, this is nothing new, what's in front of us, like support to the airport, but do you think the pandemic has added more challenge to the airport to continue to stay compatible between two major hubs, Montreal and Toronto?
Thank you, Councillor. This isn't something new. We have always identified the airport as a huge asset for continuing to grow our economics, not just international students, but international talent, new business development, the ability to host business conferences here, host meetings here, use Ottawa as a headquarters location. So it's not new, but the pandemic has challenged our airport, and 100%. And more than that, what I like to think of it as, because we stay very close to the airport through the community consultations, and it's not just about how challenged the airport is, but what is the opportunity before us now. And I think you were at the mayor's breakfast, when we were talking with the head of the Ottawa University, and how other cities are way ahead in terms of their investment and their post-pandemic economic recovery plans. And so the opportunity is for us to be creative, to work very collaboratively, to incentivize the private sector to drive our community prosperity. So I think it's about opportunity loss.
Okay, thank you, Solen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thanks, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Celine, for a good presentation. You've heard me speak already about the danger I think we face, that this amount isn't actually going to make a difference, that property tax is not the make or break decision for development decisions that are going to come along. The city is going to grow by 400,000 people, we're told, over the next 25 years. Some of those lands that are available to be developed are going to have to be developed without foregoing tax revenue. If the danger we face is that we implement an incentive that doesn't actually incent, that is irrelevant to development decisions, because it's too insignificant. What are the other parts of the package we need in order to be able to really make a difference in terms of accelerating development on these parcels ahead of what would naturally occur as a result of population growth?
Well, I think there are a few things. I do believe that we have an opportunity. I do believe that we have an opportunity to accelerate development by being proactive in this way. And if I can also say that I think it's important for us to demonstrate or to build up our brand in Ottawa that we are open for business, that we are looking for business development. And I don't know what the dollar amount would be, maybe as much as you might be, to incentivize business, but I do know that businesses do look for any opportunity, right, to get an edge. And so I don't think it would hurt, but more than that, I think what it does is gives us an opportunity to demonstrate that we're being proactive, that we want to work with business, that we're interested in business development. And what other things could we be looking at is making sure that we're open for business, not just in incentivizing, but also in ensuring that we have processes that make it frictionless to do business in Ottawa, that we have an open and welcoming business development team at the city and in the community as a whole.
Thank you. I think you've actually put it very well. I worry that in an attempt to communicate something, we are doing literally the least we could do with this program, in an attempt to be able to say that we're doing something, and that doesn't strike me as a good reason to forego tax revenues that we need to collect garbage and to house people and to maintain our roads, et cetera, et cetera. So it is important to me that if we take this step, that it makes a difference in terms of decisions by private sector businesses to locate here. And again, that is the case that I challenge staff and proponents to make. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that, and I feel the same way. And I do defer, of course, to Mark, who has demonstrated his expertise to understand what the potential impact is, but for the long term. And I do think that overall, in terms of our economic recovery, we do need to look at putting together an entire strategy, of which this can be one part of that strategy.
Well said. Thank you, Celine.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my question is going to be directed to staff.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Suling. Next,
Thank you.
From Ottawa Tourism, I'm not sure if we have Michael or Catherine with us today.
You've got Michael, if that's okay, Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Watson, councillors, city staff. I am Michael Crockett. I'm the president and CEO of Ottawa Tourism. For 9 years, though, I was also the vice president of business development and marketing for the Airport Authority. So this is an issue near and dear to my heart for sure. As you know, Ottawa Tourism is the destination marketing and management organization for Ottawa. And one of our significant responsibilities to drive visitation to our community, creating demand for tourism-related businesses in Ottawa and enhancing economic impact for our community. So needless to say, the airport plays a crucial role in helping us to meet these objectives. And that's why I'm pleased to express our support for the proposed Ottawa Airport Community Improvement Plan and the positive effects that we believe it'll have on connectivity and our ability to attract visitors and investment to the destination. Tourism and the airport, of course, were both really hard hit by COVID-19, and recovery in Ottawa has been slower than in some other places, owing to the impacts of the illegal occupation earlier this year, and of course the fact that Ottawa and Gatineau have the highest proportion of people in Canada who are still working from home. And that directly suppresses business travel to our city because, as Mark said, no one is flying to Ottawa to meet with a federal government worker at their house in Orleans, with all due respect to Councillor Luloff. Pre-pandemic, the airport helped to bring in many of our 11 million annual visitors to Ottawa and acted as a pivotal gateway for our normally thriving business and major events sector. As a key economic driver in Ottawa's third largest industry pre-pandemic, we believe that a full economic recovery for Ottawa must include a recovery for tourism. And of course, that includes our airport too. From a tourism perspective, air connectivity is critical for our destination and supports all parts of Ottawa's visitor economy: leisure, travel trade, sport hosting, and conventions, allowing more connectivity for travelers and more opportunity for our organization to do our job of attracting visitors to our destination. So for example, when we are competing for a major international convention, we are often up against bigger cities that are major airline hubs. So our city's connectivity does make a difference in terms of our ability to attract some of these events. You know, the airport had fantastic momentum before COVID-19, and we hope that this plan will help regain some of that momentum. As Mark talked about, the connectivity of the LRT will be a game changer for travelers to connect to the downtown core and the wider city. Upgrades to the retail and restaurant offerings will further enhance the visitor experience and offer more amenities for travelers, helping to generate that non-aeronautical revenue for the Airport Authority and ensuring that the airport itself is even more competitive. To support this momentum, the airport needs assistance to generate even more of that non-aeronautical revenue, and which the CIP aims to achieve through the development of airport lands. Land development is a competitive business, and it's a smart move for our community to help our only international airport be better positioned to attract new investment that wants or needs or benefits from proximity to the airport. And maybe I can take just a moment to briefly address the point made by Councillor Leeper and Councillor Menard about whether this development would happen anyway. As the guy who used to work for Mark at the airport and used to oversee land development, I fully get the question, and I agree it's the right question to ask. And I also agree with Mark that this tool will help accelerate development opportunities and may help a tenant choose Ottawa instead of another airport. So it's not just whether the development would happen here or not eventually. It may have happened eventually, but it may have been at another airport in another community. And if we can get the benefits to come to our community sooner, that's going to help expand sectors like ours, like tourism, which then further imports money from other places to be spent here in our community. Visitors are earning their money somewhere else, they're spending it here. And that supports our city's workers, supports our city's businesses, generates new incremental tax revenue here in Ottawa instead of other cities, not just the property tax revenue, other revenues as well. And again, every tax dollar generated by visitors is a tax dollar that does not have to come from residents. So it's our hope that the Airport Authority will choose to direct this incremental revenue that they'd be receiving, the part that they'd be receiving, in whole or in part towards the aggressive pursuit of new routes for the community, echoing what Mike Tremblay and Sue Ling said as well, through some targeted, market-specific and data-driven initiatives. We also know that air service development is a competitive part of the business, maybe now more than ever, and it requires significant financial commitments. And we as a community need to arm the airport with these resources. And from a tourism standpoint, we need our domestic network back. We need our connections back to key US markets and strategic hubs. We need our city's European connectivity back.
And in closing, that's why Ottawa Tourism is grateful to city and airport staff for proposing this concept, fully supportive of this creative approach to help the airport attract investment, increase revenues, and expand its route network, better serve passengers, and strengthen its important role in the recovery of the visitor economy for this city and region. Thank you.
Almost right on time, 6 seconds left. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Michael, for your intervention. Always appreciated, of course. I've been asking this question about the, will the development happen anyways? But you know what I don't have is actually a really good idea or understanding in my mind of what that development is likely to be. How are these lands likely to develop? Is it hotels, air logistics, or logistics hubs? What are the businesses that we're trying to attract to these lands, just to help me better understand it?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Councillor. I'm out of that business now, so I can't speak to what could happen actually potentially right now, or who the airport might be specifically talking to right now. But it's all those things that you talked about there and more. A hotel is a good example. A hotel can go anywhere in the city. It could go anywhere in other cities. If you look at more of the aeronautical developments, and I'll try and think of an example, but like something that needs access to an airport, but it doesn't necessarily need access to this airport. They could set up their, let's say it's an engine manufacturing facility that needs to have access to an air side of an airport. If we were competing with other cities for that, I fully respect what you're saying. This might not be the dollar amount that makes us more competitive than Montreal or some other community, but it's a piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle that could contribute to a company making a decision like that, to invest in Ottawa, invest at this airport instead of Montreal or Dubai or San Antonio. This airport's competing globally, and there's a lot of mobile assets out there. So what we can do as a community to make it more competitive here, that's only going to bring benefits to our community.
I'll be asking staff the same question in terms of what they would anticipate by way of development. But one of the obvious things would be things like hotels, and I just wonder whether the best way to ensure that hotels develop at the airport on that land is to ensure that we have lots of travelers to Ottawa, because we've invested in things that bring people to Ottawa. And we enjoy the appreciated land value at the airport as a consequence of that, without having necessarily to forego tax revenue in order to do that. If we're going to forego tax revenue, maybe it's better to do things that attract people who are arriving in Ottawa via multiple different modes, whether they're driving, taking the train, or flying. Yeah, I'll continue to noodle it. Mayor, thank you.
But maybe, can I just react to that, Mayor? Because I think you're right, except if we miss the opportunity to attract that engine manufacturer or whoever, then the benefit that comes from that, which can come to the tourism sector as well, because a lot of business travel is generated by a new business that's coming into our community. If we lose that to another community, then we have delayed the economic impact of that development happening. It's going to happen maybe 10 or 15 years later. So I encourage us to try and do things that'll help those things happen sooner. That's it.
But are those more complicated decisions? Like certainly the attaching manufacturing or industrial uses to the airport makes a ton of sense, but there's also a lot of very complex considerations of which property tax breaks might be a very small piece. Things like labor availability, raw resource available, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So sure. It starts to look even more tenuous in my mind at that point. And then are the flights direct to where those suppliers are trying to ship their goods? So I think it's a more complicated discussion than that. But point taken. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor, no, I don't see anyone else on the list. Is that it for Michael? Oh, no, Councillor Leeper, you're back off. Okay, thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Michelle Grew, Executive Director of the Ottawa Coalition of Business Improvement Areas. Michelle, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Watson. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Yep.
There we are. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor Watson, Finance and Economic Development Committee, councillors, and city staff. And thank you to Michael and Sonia and to Mark for your presentations today. The Ottawa Coalition of Business Improvement Areas, OCOBIA, represents the 19 BIAs in Ottawa's urban, suburban, and rural communities. Our BIAs are composed of an estimated 6,400 businesses and approximately 120,000 workers in various sectors that have been negatively impacted over the past 2.5 years due to pandemic and recently protests. The airport, with its own economic output into the overall GDP, has contributions even further than its geographic boundary that supports Ottawa residents and businesses. The rebound of YOW needs our urgent attention and action, as reduced activity and investment in our airport impacts Ottawa businesses and their staff. Ottawa's BIAs want a safe, affordable, and barrier-free city. The greatest issues our businesses are facing after weathering the past 2.5 years are people and rising costs. Attracting and retaining staff is an issue that is experienced in nearly every single sector to varying degrees. Removing barriers and improving connectivity to our city is a means to offer an attractive destination to live, work, and do business. Connectivity provided from the airport improves competitiveness and productivity for businesses in many sectors by attracting tourists, events and conferences, facilitating trade, transporting goods, and it directly attracts and benefits workers and their families. The reduction of direct flights to and from YOW not only adds barriers of access for Ottawa stakeholders, it increases the cost of doing business and the cost of living. Adding connections for travelers, and for cargo goods adds directly to costs. The CIP is an incentive to provide and attract YOW business tenants to invest directly into an economy beyond its boundary. It will accelerate the pace of economic recovery across our city and support Ottawa's growth and prosperity. YOW future development and improvements are necessary to support our local economy. The CIP improvements will boost Ottawa's competitiveness as a place to live, to work, and to do business. I thank you for your time. Thank you, Mayor Watson and councillors. Very quick.
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. Jeff Leeper.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I do appreciate its brevity. If we go down this path of providing this incentive to the airport, should we not also provide the same incentives in BIA areas that have been heavily affected by the pandemic? There are vacant lots that could be developed. There are underperforming spaces that are no longer suitable to today's retail that could be developed. You know, at what point do we stop providing every business that needs help with tax breaks without a larger conversation around, you know, how our commercial tax rates?
Good question. Thanks, Councillor Leeper. You're right. Where does it stop, right? I think at this point in time, when we're looking at the airport and the fact that the airport supports multiple BIAs, in fact, every BIA, and in fact, every business to a level. So the breadth of support is critical. You know, we're looking at, there have been CIPs and BIAs, as you know, maybe not necessarily impacted by the pandemic, but pre-pandemic. This is asking for a commitment on behalf of the business part, the business owners into the improvements, as opposed to just handing over money, so in grants and funding. So that you know, I would say you're right. Like where does it end when you're asking for this type of support? I think asking for support from the business community in a partnership is not a bad idea.
Well argued. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Menard, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. Similar to the question Councillor Leeper was asking, I wonder what your views would be about the market in Ottawa, right? The market is the market, and we're saying that we're going to allocate some tax funds to help induce a market at the airport. But that market is only sustainable based on customers and people, you know, attending those businesses and accessing them. So I guess the question is twofold. Are we potentially taking away some businesses that would have located in other BIA areas and putting it at the airport with this type of a program, in your view? And the second part of that question is, if we don't have the market and the customers to go there, would any incentive make a difference? Or is it really just, a market-based solution that's going to help develop that those airport lands over time?
I believe that this type of CIP is not taking away from any other investment into other areas. And so given the type of business that we're expecting to invest in the airport, to answer the first question, and I'm sorry, I forgot the second one.
Well, it's just about the market in general. And I guess, is any amount of incentive gonna bring those customers, or those direct flights, or those demand for the supply that's looking to be provided by new businesses? It's a market-based question, and you just worry that our taxpayers giving away good money to something that would happen in any event based on the larger market forces that are much larger than what we're talking about here.
It's a very good question. And of course it is demand, and we all have to do our part in communicating to especially airlines and cargo-based, so people and cargo, on how important this is. And so will it happen anyways? I believe that growing demand will eventually get us there. But I do believe that the situation that we're in right now, in terms of people, I'll just say people, attracting people, is urgent. When we're behind by 2.5 years in finding staff to work in our businesses, I don't think we can wait any longer. Do I believe this is the only tool to get that? No, demand has to be very loud, and it has to go to the right people.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate you being here.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate your input. And I believe our last guest is Mike Vorab-Boje. Apologize, Mike, if I butchered your name there.
Good morning.
Morning.
Don't apologize. I can't pronounce it myself either. It's Ukrainian origin, and I only speak English and some French. I'm with a group called Save Hunt Club Forest. We're not really that formal. I don't have a title. I'm just a participant. It's a pity we lost the map portion of the presentation earlier today, which would have shown the area specifically. Hopefully, I assume all the councillors have that map at their fingertips, if not on the slideshow. So my concern as an individual, and our group was basically founded to protect some other land, which is under the control of the Ottawa Airport Authority along Hunt Club Road. It is not within the circle currently. We only found that out a couple of weeks ago at a public meeting. Nonetheless, I have a number of concerns I'd like to bring to the City Council today. I don't have a full speech. I've just got points to go on. We have 20,432 signatories to our petition to preserve the forested land along Hunt Club Road. In terms of what that means, I did a little research this morning. I don't think any city councillors received 20,000 votes in the last election, but you all have very strong, very clear mandates. So I hope that number means something. Now, getting back to the land within the circle of the map that we can't see because we lost the slide today, that is federal government land. That is land that is owned by the Ministry of Transport of the federal government. And that is land. Some of the land in the circle in the CIP proposal is what you'd call a brownfield site. It's already in use. It's flat. Perhaps there's some old buildings that might need renovation, etc. But another portion of the land, this would be adjacent to the EY Center, is forested land. It's a living, breathing forest, of course, that was impacted by the big storm back in May. But nonetheless, we've lost so much of our forest canopy in this city recently that the idea that we are going to incentivize as city taxpayers, we're going to incentivize more forests being removed is very objectionable. I believe it's objectionable to me, and I think that's consistent with the people who are participating in our Save Hunt Club Forest plan. I would also like to, generally address the fact that our communication and participation with the federal government that owns the land has been very poor. We're not getting feedback despite our best efforts. That's a general concern. That starts with our MP in Ottawa South not being helpful in this, what we're trying to do. There's also a general concept I want to introduce. I pay property taxes, and I'm from a family with many entrepreneurs, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, construction business, hairdressing, bicycle shops, pastry shops, etc. My belief is of most entrepreneurs are independent people that want to be their own boss, want to work hard, and want to reap the profits of their work and keep as many of those profits as possible. That's my experience. I do not, I think we're in a situation municipally, provincially, federally, in which corporate welfare is simply getting out of control. The expectation that the middle-class taxpayer has to subsidize medium and big business is, I think, out of control. Okay, and I would say, looking at what this, sure the councillors on board here will know all kinds of projects that may have been less or more controversial, but I think the concept itself needs to be challenged because it's becoming part of the conversation automatically. How many incentives can we dump in here? It's part of the beginning, as opposed to the traditional entrepreneurial spirit was leave me alone. I want to run my own business and keep my own profits. So that's a general issue of concern. The last word I'm going to throw in here is ecosystem. It was brought up in a couple of times in the business ecosystem. I would remind the city that when we talk about the forested land within this development proposal, we are spending as a city billions of dollars to reduce our carbon footprint with the LRT, etc. And the idea that we're incentivizing removal of forests and B, increasing air travel to where it was before the pandemic, that seems to be directly in opposition to the general policies about climate emergency, etc. from the city of Ottawa. Anyway, I say I'm out of time, so I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Menard, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mike, for your presentation. I do want to key in on one of the points you were making around that forested area, your first point, because I'm looking at the report. It's at the very end of the report, the very last page of the report, and it's in buckets 24 and 25. I think that's what you're referring to. It's the area bounded by Leicester and Uplands.
Yes.
Okay, so I will. It's a good point. There's a lot of forested land in there. So I will raise this question in discussion with staff when we go to that point. I guess this is the area bounded by. I mean, it's a little bit separate from the Hunt Club Forest you're talking about, but they're in the direct vicinity. So I don't know if you wanted to expand on it. Just your concern is losing that forested area as part of this CIP and development area that the airport intends to develop.
Well, my concern is that, again, it's not the Hunt Club Forest per se, but it is forest on Crown land. So it's public land. So I believe every Canadian citizen has an opinion, has a right to express an opinion on it. As a city taxpayer, I do not want to incentivize the destruction of the remaining forests. The city has been very frank in their discussions about the damage to our parkland, etc., the forest canopy we've lost. I would like to remind council that the EY Center, itself and the parking lot, that was all forest at one point. It's already been lost. There's a lot of forest at risk along the airport parkway. And again, in that Leicester Uplands corridor. I think, again, this is not a complaint to councillor. It's the federal government we believe the federal government needs to look at that mandate from the mid-90s when the Ottawa International Airport Authority was created, and to determine whether the continued removal of forested land on airport property is still consistent with the federal government's climate change strategy and the flurry of declarations that they're making on that issue. But certainly as a city taxpayer, as a citizen of the city, I do not want an incentive to reward people for cutting down forests. And I think if you look again at your map, you'll see there's plenty of other land in that circle that is not forested. Again, perhaps brownfield sites or existing buildings that may need upgrade. But I do think it's the federal government it's the entity, the airport is an entity of the federal government. The federal government ought to be providing the incentives and the financing, not the municipal taxpayer.
Okay, good points. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Now questions to staff. Questions to staff. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much. So I'll just start on the point we were just hearing about, the forested land. So just to confirm from staff, is that forested land that's in that blue outlined area, would that be slated for development as part of the airport development lands?
Correct, Councillor. That land is included within the CIP boundary. It's presently unserviced, and in sections of that land are also environmentally protected. I think it's important to remember that any application under this program is subject to review and approval by committee and council, and would be subject to all of the approvals that would come with any development through development review. So while the land is included, and it has tremendous potential for future transit-oriented development, I would say if the airport was to weigh in, they would not describe it as immediate potential for development.
Okay, and why would we include the SIP as part of that area? Why would we reduce that area so that the forested lands were not part of the proposed CIP?
As I noted, the lands are still available for development, but they're not presently serviced. So once the LRT is running to the airport with those two stations, there is, we hope, going to be some interest in transit-oriented development adjacent, certainly to the Upland station close to the EY Center. I would invite Steve Willis or Don Herwire, who have more of a planning background than I do, to weigh in on that question if they wish. Don?
Sure, thanks, Cindy. And yeah, just building on your response, there certainly are environmental constraints on those lands, but there are also, as Cindy alluded to, development potential. So there's a number of studies that have to be done before any development could happen in there. The airport's very much aware of that. So it's at this point we can't draw those lines because those studies have yet to happen. So there's definitely development potential, but there's also environmental constraints.
I would say if it's 10 years off, which we're saying the SIP is going to be 4 plus an extension of 5 years, then I don't know why we would include those lands if they're not going to be developed anytime in that period anyway. Why would we include forested lands that we're trying to save our tree canopy, not have more of it destructed? So I don't know why we would include those ones, but that's just me. I'll just 2 other quick questions. Should there not be a requirement that the development would not have happened without a subsidy in this? Why aren't we including that in this case?
There was some significant discussion amongst staff on that requirement. It is a typical requirement for our Main Street CIPs that the applicant must confirm that the development would not have otherwise proceeded in the absence of the incentive. However, given the airport lands and the airport opportunity and the fact that pre-pandemic the airport was engaged in conversations with numerous companies, businesses, uses that have all essentially gone away over the last 2.5 years, we really see the CIP opportunity and the incentive as an opportunity to hopefully rekindle. So we've drawn a line that in the absence of a building permit being issued for any works on lands within the boundary, that the applicant, the tenant, would be eligible for the CIP incentive.
Okay, I'm just not hearing very good, I guess, justification for that, for taxpayer money, right? I don't understand why we wouldn't have some more hardened criteria to ensure that development wouldn't normally have otherwise happened here. Because if it's going to happen anyway, then I don't understand why would we be providing the incentive. So
I think the concern that you express has been addressed by some of our speakers this morning. It isn't that the development would not have otherwise occurred. The development may not occur in Ottawa at all. And the purpose of the incentive is to make Ottawa, the Ottawa airport, competitive in discussions with businesses looking to locate at an airport. And the incentive will at least get our airport back at the table.
Okay, I think it's important to provide evidence for that statement, though. If we're going to say that, then we should provide evidence for it, which is not located in the report, or would not be located as part of the CIP when they're applying. The last point I'll just make is that it seems like there's a few criteria here in terms of the applications that would come in. They're required to be submitted. They're required to have an independent tax study by a qualified consultant. I've seen those. But if we're going to be handing out public money to private interests, the criteria should be a little bit more, I guess, stringent, should it not, in terms of desirable in some way? For example, we wouldn't just, if you're saying, oh, this could locate at another airport, well, we wouldn't just want, say, another car dealership here or another large pot shop or something. I mean, why is there no criteria on the type of businesses that we want to see form here?
I understand what you're saying. The document 2 lays out the requirements of the CIP consistent with other CIPs that we have done. The airport discussions that we have had with Mark and his team, they do clearly lay out several uses that would be likely to locate at the airport. I think it's important to understand that they're not talking about shopping malls or retail or anything of that nature. They would all be uses that would be compatible in an airport environment. If you feel that the final bylaw could benefit from identifying scale and scope of use, I think that's something that staff could go away and look at.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I think it's worth, we're hearing the mood of committee that there's time between now and council that we can talk to the airport authority and see if we can put a little bit more definition on airport related uses to be clearer about that. I think we can bring a proposal back to council about how to modify this slightly so that there's some correlation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I guess actually my question follows the line of questioning of Councillor Menard. I read the report, but I'm wondering if there is a detailed business case like leading up to this proposal for the subsidies. I was looking for a detailed business case, like when you go to a company that potentially would maybe relocate back to Ottawa to see what it's going to take. Did we do one?
There's no business case per se, Councillor. The staff report and the CIB program has been built in collaboration with the airport. They, of course, being subject matter experts, excuse me, on their lands and the opportunity with the companies that they are looking to attract to the lands. So no formal business case. I think that would be something that the airport would undertake as the applicant working in collaboration with their tenant. And this tracks to some degree with Councillor Leeper's comment, earlier. And so I think that relationship between the airport and the applicant is where the significance of the incentive in the context of the bigger business decision being made, that's where that discussion and debate would happen before an application reached the city.
Well, with all due respect, you're asking for fairly significant contribution from the city. And just to surmise or to think or to, conclude without solid data, to me is a big oversight. I think that we have to know that what we're doing is absolutely solid. I'm not a business expert, but just to guess at what would happen and do it before, have a council vote on this before the airport authority undertakes a business case, I think is putting the cart before the horse. So I'm just and what I'm looking for too is a total of what this might cost us. Do you have a figure of what we're looking at?
Well, just maybe I think Mr. Willis wants to speak, Councillor. Just to be clear, a business case is done on each of the applications, not the.
But I mean, I'm thinking that I think that there should be a business case on why this is needed. To go to airlines and say we're Canada's capital. We're getting back. We're pre-pandemic. We're expecting our population growth to be 400,000. We're growing around the airport in the south end of the city. Is this actually needed? Have you been told that Edmonton or another city has the inside track? Would this incentive do anything? Is it enough? I'm just saying, like, instead of going forward, let's figure out exactly what exactly is needed.
Well, you heard from Mr. Larush that the city of Edmonton itself provides significant dollars to incent airlines to come and use their airport. So yes, there is subsidization by airports in Canada back to airlines to get them in. And that's one of the reasons why we have a 14% drop and Edmonton is up in their traffic. They have that incentive fund that they've established. We chose not to bring that forward, an incentive fund, but to bring the CIP, because as you know, we have very, very few tools in our toolkit to help businesses for the simple reason we're not allowed to bonus under the Municipal Act. Mr. Willis?
So Mayor, you covered the much of what I was going to say. In Ontario, we have virtually no tools related to economic development to use, and the Community Improvement Plan program is virtually the only tool allowed in Ontario. So it's not like staff could go do a business case and say, let's do this approach versus the other approach. We are constrained in Ontario to very few tools. This is the only one. And we really are facing real competition. And I want to just say, one of the concerns we have is this is not just the pandemic. Before the pandemic, Ottawa lost the route between Ottawa and San Francisco, which has been a hit to the tech industry in Ottawa. And when tech companies are thinking about expanding their operations and have regular interactions, they could easily go to Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, and be an hour in good traffic drive from Toronto Pearson Airport and get a direct flight to San Francisco. So Ottawa's competitiveness and its relationship to the airport is a threat if we don't have a rebound in airport traffic. We've lost European travel in the short term, and that also, for a number of Canadian businesses who do export-related businesses, including businesses the federal government is supporting to try to do more export-related businesses, they can't connect through Ottawa. So we have a real threat to lose business opportunities to other Ontario cities and other Canadian cities if we choose to ignore this. Councillor Leeper raises a really interesting question about, is this the best tool we can? It's the only tool we've got other than directly subsidizing a route. And staff did not bring that proposal forward because I think it's too rich for our blood at this point in time, and that we didn't think it was responsible to bring that idea forward. It is the only other option available to us in Ontario. So again, as Cindy said, every single application has the scrutiny of council. The case has to be made. We've conceded that Councillor Leeper and Menard have made some suggestions that we might need to tighten the criteria. We're going to go back and do this, but it's not like there's a business case for alternative models here.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting, do we have a business case to say this is absolutely needed? That's what I'm suggesting. And I think Councillor Menard's line of questioning about the types of companies, I know that we will have say on whether or not a company will be eligible or not, and I appreciate that. But is this, would this work? I guess would that incentive be enough to lure a company in to the city? Because I think that and we heard it here this morning, that the airline industry will eventually rebound. I mean, we could do other things, and that is, incentivize the federal government, or not incentivize, but encourage the federal government to bring more workers back to the city, to have more air, that would encourage more air travel. But and more demand. Obviously, one follows the other. So is this tool going to do it? I guess that's what I'm asking.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll reiterate that we're looking at this not just in the pandemic. We've looked at this for the last 10 years, and you've had people such as Mr. Crockett, who had real life experience trying to market this airport in relationship to businesses that could go to any Canadian airport. We're not trying to lure somebody from Canada to the airport. That's not what the program's trying to do. We're trying to lure someone to Ottawa as opposed to Kitchener. That's the intention of the program. That's the intention. And we'd like to bring businesses and the like to from Montreal or would have go to another city otherwise. And I think, again, we've conceded we can tighten the criteria to enable that. Ultimately, this is we are getting a property tax uplift if these businesses come. If they don't come at all, we don't get any property tax uplift. And over time, it's a time limited tax equivalent grant. So we have a percentage of the uplift, and then ultimately 100% of the uplift. And we are looking at tightening, as I said, the criteria to make sure there's the case for that. Our hands are tied about other options. We wish the federal government would have more direct intervention to all mid-sized airports in Canada, and the mayor has previously written to the federal government on that. We have urged the federal government to bring people back and have a more clear, publicly communicated plan to bring people back. We are doing all these things, but this is needed not just because of the pandemic. It was needed even before the pandemic.
I guess I'm just asking, do you know in fact it's needed? Have you gone to a company and said, this is what we're proposing? What will you do?
Mr. Mayor, again, Mr. LaRoche is on. If Mr. LaRoche is still on the line, they have been marketing the airport lands for many years for related uses. I mean, this is not necessarily about luring another Air Canada per se. They've been successful in some areas of getting some mid-sized airlines and service-related uses, but they are struggling because those uses could go elsewhere. Northern airlines, regional airlines don't have to come to Ottawa for some of these hub-type activities. They could go elsewhere. And when other airports like Halifax are actually offering incentives, we get knocked out of the running.
Well, there you go. That's all I'm asking. There other cities are doing this. There you have the inside track. That's what I'm talking about. Business. Let's take a look at all the things that are needed in order to make this thing fly. If we don't have that case, I think then we have to just put the program in place and see if it works. And to me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But we have to know that companies are really interested in this and are going to bite at it. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I'll just make a very brief comment. One of the speakers, and I can't recall which, said this has to be part of a broader strategy, and I couldn't agree more. But we need to start somewhere. We need to do something. The airport's on a decline. That is not healthy for the local economy, and that's no knock on Mr. LaRoche and his staff, who work very hard to provide service to people in the region and do try to market this facility.
Okay.
Councillor Dudas, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually want to start by just saying that I want to echo some of my colleagues' comments that I would like to, and I look forward to seeing staff come back before council with a more robust kind of definition on airport-related uses and what that would look like. Because I want to make sure that while we would assume that the market will dictate itself in that end, there's a lot of opportunity for job growth and good jobs with this kind of incentivization. And I'd like to see that we're getting that out of this. So I do look forward to that. I also would like to say that one of my kind of bugaboos about this particular CIP was the fact that there wasn't that kind of criteria that we see with some of the other CIPs that we institute across the city. So I would ask that, once again, you've already committed to doing that. I'd like to see that when you come back to council. But in terms of the overarching intent for this program, I do fully support it. And I say that because, we just heard about a need for business, because I totally understand that. I think the difficulty is we are seeing it. We've already been seeing the fact that not just through the pandemic, this area has been underdeveloped, underutilized in terms of economic job incentives or growth. I commend the airport for trying to work to acquire these businesses and these investments, but we haven't seen it come to fruition to the same extent as some of the major airports in some other Canadian cities or even cities across North America. So my question is one of my colleagues had asked this, and I do want to know, we are anticipating growth in our city, 400,000 people in the next, I think it's now 25, 24 years. Do you anticipate that markets and growth would naturally have seen this particular area become more of an economic hub, or is this something that can spur this on more so? Why is this CIP necessary for this area, even outside of the pressures that we're facing with the pandemic and coming out of that?
Thank you. The opportunity is really about capitalizing on something that's already been identified in the new official plan. The airport's been designated as a special economic district because it's recognized as having land available for development and the potential to attract employment to that development. So it's not a residential area per se. So as the population in Ottawa certainly grows over time, yes, it's possible that those lands, and I assume they would certainly develop over time, but the opportunity is today. It's not 15 years or 20 years or 25 years from now. The opportunity is today. And the airport is in a situation coming out of the pandemic where they're trying to get back to where they were, which was still short of where they needed to be pre-pandemic. And it's our strong belief that the CIP can not only help them get there in the short term, but in the medium term will provide the opportunity for them to be competitive with other mid-sized airports and municipalities across the country who are competing very aggressively for, cargo hubs and new airline hubs and other commercial opportunities and other ancillary airport uses. So you're certainly right in identifying that, yes, population will grow, market demand will support development eventually, but the feeling in the broader business community, and certainly the recommendation of staff and economic development, is waiting for that opportunity would be short-sighted. And I think that our speakers today have done a better job than I of articulating why the urgency is now and why this tool has the potential to be helpful.
No, thank you for that. It was interesting because one of the questions to you was about the aspect of criteria. Would this business have set up shop near the airport regardless of this incentive? And it was intriguing because in your comment back, in your response back, you had said that yes, maybe there was initial conversations by the airport and these entities, but that it wasn't a done deal. And I do, once again, I look forward to seeing that kind of fleshed out, a more robust aspect to that in the report. But even to me, that the fact that we are competing with other airports and we have very likely lost that opportunity or on the verge of losing it without some kind of bolstering of offerings. Once again, I think that was a good answer to that question because we need to secure these businesses. The only other thing too is, so once again, we're talking about this from a business lens. We're talking about this from the city's overall economic benefits. Michael Crockett touched on this slightly with tourism and attracting people here. But, once again, I recall when I moved to the city of Ottawa and I was surprised that as the nation's capital, I can't even recall how many flights we had in and out, but it was very little. Like I had to drive to Montreal or Toronto just to get to other locations, to Europe, or, the cost of also taking flights to tourist destinations was expensive from Ottawa. We've seen that shift as more and more airlines have invested in our city, have seen benefits in it, or attracted to it. We've lost a lot of that through the pandemic. And this isn't a question to you on behalf of the Airport Authority. I do know that they were here and I'm not asking that. But in terms of a resident who is seeking a fulsome offering of destinations through airlines, through our national capital airport, is this something that can help spark that return over time where, through investment in the adjacent area, we can now see those airliners go, okay, well, they actually care about this, they're investing in this, we can bring more airlines back?
The investment will create some rental revenue for the airport. I think Mark made a good case about reinvesting that revenue back in airport operations to attract routes. I've heard the airport describe attracting a route to Ottawa or any airport, frankly, across the country now as a bit of an auction. Whoever shows up with the biggest amount of money, the biggest incentive is to backstop the route is the one that's going to win. This program doesn't do that directly, but it does create the potential for the airport to drive revenue, which they can then reinvest in expanding the offering of nonstop routes. The other thing is the investment and the development on the airport campus starts to create some critical mass, which I think is what you were alluding to, Councillor. It creates some critical mass of investment and employment that does start to send a bigger message to the broader aviation and aviation ancillary community that Ottawa is a good place to do business. And if they are considering locating at an airport, that Ottawa is a good choice for a variety of reasons, including the availability of the CIP incentive.
Wonderful. I have one more question, but I will point out the fact that this brings jobs. So to our residents, this brings jobs. So the only other question I would have is I do recall when the airport had originally come to the task force, had approached all the stakeholders. They weren't asking for a CIP, they were asking for a bevy of different things. Steve Willis had mentioned a moment ago about, subsidizing route, different things like that. And it was too rich for our blood. So once again, why was it that the CIP was determined as the best option and those other options, the expenditure by the city and our taxpayers, was ruled out as not the most effective way of actually achieving these goals or investing our tax dollars?
Mr. Mayor, sorry, Cindy, if I can take this one. So first of all, we can't bonus businesses directly in Ontario because of Ontario law and the Municipal Act. Other cities have found a way to, through the airport authorities, provide some financial support for them to subsidize routes. That's a direct investment. It's definitely directly comes out of operating dollars of the budget, and it's a set amount in a block of money over time. By using the CIP method, no dollar is spent by the city unless a project actually is materialized. And if a project actually happens, the city gets a proportion of the incoming property taxes from the new development as it develops, and over time, our proportion of property taxes increased to ultimately getting 100%. So for us, from a pure taxpayer impact point of view, no dollar is handed out unless a project is realized, and we do get additional incremental dollars, although albeit not 100% right away, but over time we get 100%. So we felt for the taxpayer in Ottawa, it was the most responsible solution.
Thank you for that clarity. I appreciate it. Thank you. That's enough from me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So you've heard my concern expressed throughout this debate with respect to putting upwards of $25 million into grants that may ultimately be irrelevant to the way in which this area develops. And I do look forward to seeing from the various different proponents some harder evidence that this would make a difference, because $25 million in foregone tax revenue is nothing to sneeze at. And if we don't need to spend it, I would suggest that we shouldn't. But the reports, and I've had the chance to go back through the report again, I take it the companies that we are hoping to attract, or the land development that we're hoping to attract, falls within that universe mentioned in the report: light maintenance hangars, heavy maintenance, repair, overhaul prospects, hotel developers, land developers focused on aerospace security and logistics sectors, and other commercial sectors. Is that the universe of what staff are anticipating could be attracted if we go down this path?
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Herwire and I are trading texts as we talk. The existing zoning for that area is very restrictive to airport-related and ancillary-related uses, and I think criteria can be closely linked to what the zoning already permits. And I think it's a really good clue to make sure we're not getting the cannabis shop that was referenced earlier, because that's not one of the uses permitted in those areas. So I think what we can do is we can work from the zoning as a way of supplementing the criteria for the program. They overlap anyhow, but we can again draw from that list, tighten it up.
Okay. I wonder, like when I'm trying to envision what kind of a company or what kind of a development it is that we're trying to put on the land, these are the sort of things that staff are anticipating, right? Do you have any insight as to the role that property tax plays in the decision by these sorts of entities vis-a-vis, versus, for example, how many tourists are visiting Ottawa in a year, and do we need more hotels? Do we have a labor force that's available? Or are there ancillary businesses that could support an overhaul facility, et cetera? how important, in your view, is property tax to the decision of these types of entities to locate in areas like this?
So Chair, if we go back in time to the Beyond 2036 discussions, we had a lot of discussion about the complex economic engines in a city an airport could actually be, and all the related intertwined uses that could actually come. So there is a mix of businesses that are naturally situated at an airport and nowhere else that ultimately could happen, and the most successful airports are actually doing that. And tourism is part of it, but there are other, think about all of the logistics related uses and the airline support related uses, security and the like. Federal government has a lot of stuff immediately near the airport, for example, that are in the security related business, and they're all subcontracted out to private sector companies. Again, those types of uses are all definitely airport related. The property tax, we know, is never going to be the biggest incentive that maybe a major business would want, but it's the only tool under Ontario law we have available to us. And so if the city is contributing to this, and we hope that would then encourage senior governments to pay more attention to the airport issue as well, they may be able to add to what we have to do. But this is the tool we have. It's the only tool we have.
I just, what's the saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Are we using a tool for the sake of using a tool as opposed to responsibly and prudently allocating the resources with which taxpayers entrust us?
So, Mr. Mayor, as I indicated, if this program is successful, we will attract uses. They will pay property taxes, a portion of which initially will go to our property tax roll, and ultimately 100% will go to our property tax roll. If the uses don't come, the city's not spending a dime. So it is a prudent use. It is a very tactical use of a very, very focused program that is tied to an outcome of increased property taxes for the city. And we appreciate there's always demands on the tax resources. We absolutely are aware of that. But this, again, is a very, very focused tool. In Ontario, it's the only tool. And as I said, if nothing happens if the airport is not successful marketing the site, the city isn't out a dollar at all.
Again, and Councilor Menard, I know, will agree with me that if we are giving grants to companies that would have located there anyways, then that's not necessarily the wisest use of that resource.
And Mayor, I have committed, and the team has committed, we're going to look at some tightening of the criteria.
Okay. And sorry, just a planning question. Are SIPs tied to secondary plans? Do we have to have a secondary plan before we create a SIP?
Under law, they're not related, but Mr. Herwire can talk about, supplement that answer.
Yes, no, that's correct. They are not, it's not a prerequisite to have a secondary plan. There is intentions following the new official plan to develop a secondary plan for the much broader airport area, but it's certainly not a requirement.
Yeah, that strikes me as being important to do, is to do that secondary planning process. And I recall that we are planning on doing it. So I'll look forward to that. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the questions that have been asked. This is federal land, and I can't help but ask why the federal government's not playing a bigger role in that, in assisting the airport. This is the nation's capital. This is where all the embassies are located. This is internationally and diplomatically, it's important for us to have a good, strong airport. And we're talking about federal land. Why isn't the federal government playing a bigger role?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to use the right terminology. I'm sure Mr. LaRoche can give a far better terminology. But basically, many years ago, the federal government got directly out of the airport business, and they created these effectively not-for-profit corporations called the airport authorities, with the mandate to run and develop the airport lands and generate the business. So since that decision, the federal government has been arm's length to the running of airports in Canada. And that's across Canada, where the divestiture went to an airport authority. And again, Mr. LaRoche and others can correct me if I'm not using the right language here. The councillor makes an interesting point, though. I mean, there is across Canada an a need for some sort of national aviation recovery strategy. I think it is that, but as I said earlier, this was not just about the pandemic. This goes beyond the pandemic. As I said, the loss of the routes, some of the US routes, is a concern, and population growth won't alone fix that. We are facing competition from other areas. We would like to see a federal support, and as I said, the mayor has written to the federal government on the airport in the past, and we have advocated on that.
Mr. Mayor, I will also add that over the last 12 months, the federal government has contributed about $16 million to airport operations. That's $6.4 million for the LRT airport terminal station, $3.9 million for some taxiway rehabilitation, and $5.7 million from the airport relief fund, which helped cover a portion of the 2021 operating costs at the airport. So they haven't certainly been absent, but of course, Mr. Willis is quite correct in how he characterizes the relationship.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm aware of the airport authorities, but this is a special case where we are the nation's capital. So, but in terms of growth, we're looking at this at transit. Are we going to get back to levels that we were at before? Travel is going down everywhere, you know, because of Zoom, like what we're doing right now, and other factors. There may not be the full recovery that we have. How do we take that into account?
So Mayor, just to, we talk a bit about tourism related travel, and we do hope it will bounce back because the number of jobs in the city, it is one of the largest industries in the city, and it employs people from all kinds of diverse backgrounds in all parts of the city. So we hope to see that rebound back and urge all governments to collaborate with each other to see that recovery. But the airport isn't just about tourism. The airport also does an enormous amount of business in the area of parcel and packaging and logistics handling, which has grown during the pandemic, actually grown quite considerably. So that business is up. And as we also know, Ottawa is a regional center for much of Canada for medical services, and that it comes through both the patients and their caregivers and family come through air travel to Ottawa, because Ottawa is very much a gateway to Northern Canada. So, you know, I don't want to be all negative about the prospects for the airport. The airport has major roles that are not just tourism oriented, and we need to grow whichever one of these sectors or all of these sectors in tandem for a successful airport.
That's an interesting point you raise about packages, et cetera. And I wonder, you know, how, like having Amazon here and having people ordering things and things being delivered more. I'm not sure of the economics of it, but how does that, will that grow, and how does that affect a flight, you know, getting a direct flight to London or whatever?
So Mayor, I don't want to create a direct relationship as in the growth in other sectors will get us a flight to London or Frankfurt. That those are different business streams. You know, we have, and the airport, when we talk to them, they're marketing them in very different ways. But, you know, there are growth potential in Canada. You think about our role in flights to the north, well, there could be other regional type roles we could, as a mid-sized airport, play, provided Ottawa was competitive. There are these support functions, as I said, to local businesses and industry delivery of packages, which is a separate business. You know, FedEx is coming in with a major flight. That's not a passenger flight. So, you know, and it's not just FedEx, but that's just an example. So the airport is marketing to different channels and trying to find uptake for airport activity for all of those. Thank
you. And I appreciate that we're going to look more closely at who qualifies for these CIPs, since it seems a bit broad. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Gower.
Yeah, big picture. I sense a lot of skepticism from committee members on CIPs. And I seem to remember that Mr. Willis, in the private sector, one of his projects was in helping municipalities develop CIPs. And I was wondering, Steve, if you could comment on, do these work? Are they worthwhile? Are they helpful to the economic vitality of municipalities in Ontario?
So, Mr. Mayor, we have commissioned a consulting report, which is in the process of being finished off, to support the program review for next year for the CIP programs in general. And that report is looking at evidence from other Ontario municipalities on measuring the economic impact, both in terms of direct investment and indirect investment. The other thing that we're getting advice in that program, really to answer a lot of nagging questions of committee for the last couple of years, is what are they doing in other cities to get some of this information for improving the criteria, demonstrating the benefit? How could we up our program? And so we're getting advice from the consultants as well about what other cities in Ontario are doing to improve the program fronts. And our intention is that when we bring that report forward, should we have a general improvement strategy across it, it'll apply to all of our CIPs, and we'll come back with amendments and tweaks to all the programs to match that.
Okay, that's good to hear. I'm going to be supporting the report recommendations here at FEDCO and looking forward to longer term some of that information. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? So I'll just offer a couple of comments. Councillor Kavanaugh, I think you asked about federal support, but just to remind everyone, we did receive federal support for the airport spur line for LRT. As you know, it wasn't part of our affordability plan. And the extension to Trim instead of Place d'Orleans in the east, and the southern extension to the EY Center and the airport were funded entirely by the federal and provincial governments, not the city government, in addition to the 16 million that Cindy talked about. Secondly, I've had a number of discussions with the high-tech executives who are very frustrated that they have very few options to have their employees and future employees come and go out of our city because there's so few direct flights. You saw the numbers. It's really quite astounding. The number has dropped significantly. And these high-tech folks are saying we're now going and having our meetings in Montreal or Toronto because there's so many direct flight options there. That's not good for the economy as well. It's a critical piece of infrastructure for our tourism community. If we don't have the capacity to bring more people in, particularly on direct flights, whether it's the old London flight or the I think the Frankfurt flight, that has a direct impact. We heard from the tourism president and the various business associations. So we have very, very few tools. This, in fact, really is the only tool we have to offer any kind of help to an organization. And eventually, those tax dollars start coming back to the city. So I would urge members of committee and then council to support the report. Staff have heard some concerns by some members of council, and they'll address them before next Wednesday's meeting. But I think this is we're helping to send, quite frankly, a lifeline to the airport. They're, in serious. They're in a serious situation as a result of COVID, as a result of government policies to not include us as one of the 4 hub international sites during the height of the pandemic. And we now have to rally behind, as leaders in the community, to support this organization that creates so many jobs and creates so many opportunities for not just the tourism sector, but for the broader good of the community. So on the report, carried. Thank you. Our next item that was held is stage 2 contingency funding. Councillor Menard, you had a question?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I have a few questions on this one and just thought it important we hold this one given the timing and the amount of money. So just on the reasons for the extra funds and the different categories that are in the report for the extra funds. One of them is around the stage 2 risk transfer and the city allocations. And during the procurement process, the city determined that Transit Next and East-West connectors could not efficiently take on the full scope of risk related to utilities. So I'm just looking for more information on that, because as a result, the city structured the risks sharing regimen whereby it would hold a portion of the risk related to utility relocates and conflicts. And now that, of course, is coming back to us with a greater charge. So I have a number of questions. That's the first one.
So is it Wendy or Michael?
Mr. Mayor, I can start and provide some feedback on that, and then Wendy, happy for you to provide feedback as well. So one of the challenges with utilities is it's largely outside of the control of the two parties, the two contracting parties, East West Connectors and Transit Next. And so in terms of costs that are coming from the utilities, those are kind of directed by the utilities. If there's changes that are directed by the utilities, in many instances, the two P3 consortiums have limited ability to influence those outcomes. And so the risk transfer was set up as it was. There's specific obligations for those utilities where we could get them signed up to, for example, design timelines and construction timelines. They've done that, and that was meant to help ensure the work gets done in a timely manner. It doesn't impact the P3 consortiums. I think that's less of the issue. I think that we've been able to, for the most part, mitigate any kind of project delays and construction delay impacts. It's been more about cost escalation on the utility side, cost sharing arrangements on the utility side, and just scope increases on the utility side. So things that are outside the control of the two consortiums.
Okay, but these are the sorts of things we hear in P3s all the time, that we're supposed to be transferring our risk over, and that's why we might pay a premium. So in this case, why wasn't the risk transferred?
The risk, is not transferred for utilities, in part because those consortiums have limited ability to influence Hydro Ottawa and Hydro One and Enbridge and the telecoms. The city's better placed to manage that risk.
Okay, and initially it was thought that we wouldn't be having these issues with utilities, as I read the report, that they would remain relatively in place. There wouldn't be a large shift, as I understand it. So what happened?
Well, I think that, we've outlined a number of changes that kind of were directed by the utility operations. Hydro Ottawa was affected by a major substation fire. Hydro One was affected by the same. That caused us to have to rework some of the schedule activities. We saw some rework caused by Hydro One in relation to the Woodruff pedestrian bridge. That's causing some additional costs. There's been market escalation on the cost in general. The other, big one that we point to there is with the Hydro Ottawa network. In the base case, we may have assumed that it's just a pole relocation, that we're just maintaining the wires on a pole, but there may be a variety of restrictions or conflicts in the actual area as we progress through design that forces us to go from an aerial relocation to an underground conduit bank. That increases the cost significantly. In those cases, the city's on the hook for those additional costs because they're directed by Hydro Ottawa, and they're right to do so. Hydro Ottawa is doing what it needs to protect its asset. The city has to take those additional costs on board.
Yeah, it's unfortunate though. I mean, ideally, when you have partners like Hydro Ottawa and you're planning a major project like this, you wouldn't have unassumed or would have assumed that that would be taken into account for our original project budget, especially utility locates. That's a pretty basic one as I understand it. And so that should be part of the design, you would think initially. I also have questions about the percentage that we set aside. So on stage one, we set aside a 5.1% contingency fund. Stage two, we set aside only 3.3%. So given the lessons on stage one, why was it such a lower percentage that we set aside?
That was the number that was brought forward at the time as part of the procurement package. Was it too low? In hindsight, it appears too low. I don't know, Wendy, if you have any other comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think as we've spoken and addressed in the report, we've seen some escalation, some construction inflation that we could not have predicted that's happened, largely due to the environment impacted by COVID. So that's part of it as well in terms of the report that you have in front of you and the ask that's being placed to council today.
Okay, but again, it doesn't really answer the question of why we went with a 5.1 contingency fund for stage one and a 3.3% contingency plan for stage two. So that's the question.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I can't answer that. I don't know the full rationale for how it was set at that particular number. I can only say that in retrospect, it could have been higher.
I see Isabel's popped on, and I think Isabel has a bit of background here as well.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, part of the question was with the experience with stage one. So the timing of the approval of this report for stage two was done in March. Actually, it was February 2019. So at the time, we did not expect these escalations.
Okay, I mean, I think at the time, though, what was used to push through that report in a very short amount of time was that you were saying it was rushed through council, as you recall, was that the cost escalations could go up and up if we didn't approve everything right then and there. And now we're sort of saying, well, we didn't anticipate the cost escalation at that time. So something's not adding up. I guess I'm concerned about the confidence that this will be enough to complete stage two as we have it right now, which is already delayed. So how confident are we that the funds that we're talking about allocating will be enough for a contingency to complete the rest of stage two?
I'll start, Michael, if that's okay. And I just want to go back to your first point, Councillor, and I'm going to reiterate that at the time the stage two was approved, COVID was not in the equation. We did not see the cost escalations that we're seeing today. So that was unforeseen and something that we really did not know about. With respect to your second half of the question, I'm just going to ask Michael if he could provide a little bit more detail on that one.
So on the go forward on the utility side, I think that there's still risk. Some of it stems from the cost sharing agreements that are in place, so that where there's work still being done to negotiate final cost sharing agreements on some of the work. In terms of progress on the projects, we believe that Trillium Line South is largely complete, all the utility work. So we're much closer to stabilizing the final costs there. On the Confederation line, as you know, we just finished the final transitway closure this past weekend, and so we're in a pretty good space in terms of utility conflicts and understanding where we're going to go. We still have a lot of work to do to provide the substation connections, and whether there's any kind of impacts to costs there stemming from market escalation, we don't have that information. So in terms of the go forward and utilities, we're probably getting in a better position by the end of the year to assess that, but I wouldn't say that we're there to get us through to the end of the project.
Okay, thank you for that. And just on the COVID stuff versus changes to the plan, 46 million of this is stage one lessons learned being reallocated. And then there's been design changes and scope increases. Certainly some of that might be related to the pandemic, but some of these costs are not pandemic related. It's in the report anyway. Utility locate discovery, for example. So it can't all just go onto the pandemic. And I guess the question that we all have on our minds, or at least I do, is we've repeatedly seen the large P3 projects like that fail to protect the city's financial and operational interest. And despite the promised risk transfer to the private partner, and we're seeing that now in the LRT inquiry that's going on. And so at what point will we stop recommending this large P3 model that is producing such risk for us on the legal side, on a confidence side for residents, and obviously not producing the results that we expected financially and operationally for the large P3s that we've got in Ottawa. So is there a rethink going on now at city staff with the inquiry that we've got, with the results that have happened, with the financials on Lansdowne, with LRT stage 2, where it was discovered that we didn't meet the technical score but went on ahead anyway? Is there a rethink going on about large P3 projects in the city and quite frankly their risk to us?
Ultimately, Councillor, that'll be a council decision, not a staff decision. They may bring forward a recommendation, but any new project on a go-forward basis has to come to committee and council for approval. And if the majority of people on that committee or council don't support a P3, then it won't go ahead. Straightforward.
I do hope we have more professional analysis too that comes to us, Mayor, from our staff, because
Well,
you got to think that we'd be reevaluating given all the situations that occurred here in Ottawa now.
Yeah, I have confidence in our staff, and I don't think denigrating them in public is a wise human resource policy.
Nobody's denigrating staff, Mayor. That's just flippant.
Their presentation unprofessional.
No, what I'm saying is I'm asking for our professional staff, not you, to come back and talk to us about the risk issues that are occurring with P3s. Not that I'm not.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since I have to deal with stage 2, of course, construction quite a bit in Bay Ward, it's pretty overwhelming, and I appreciate the cooperation of stage 2 team in keeping me up to date. I can't help but wonder when we had an issue with a pedestrian bridge because a utility was found was undetected earlier, and it caused a delay of the pedestrian bridge going across in the Connaught corridor. This was one that was planned, and the old bridge had to be torn down, and it's caused a lot of inconvenience for cyclists and pedestrians. How much did that cost, and how does this figure into this?
So Councillor, we don't have the final number yet. So the approach ramp on the western side, the eastern side, it was determined in a late technical review by Hydro One that the fill level over an existing line, so the line was known to be there, but they flagged that the fill level in the design was too high, and so we had to rework the ramps. Reworking the ramp is probably, in the $1.5 to $2.5 million range.
Yeah, I'm concerned about this. It's not just that, but the overall inconvenience and the extra expenses of creating detour routes, and it's been pretty stressful for residents, and I think it's important that this be looked at very carefully in terms of how could this have been prevented, because we don't need this cost, especially when it was basically an error.
Right.
Can you?
Yeah, no, I mean, Councillor, we were absolutely, disappointed as a project team that this has been the case, and we were absolutely trying to get that pedestrian bridge in service before taking down the old one, so that this 4-month gap, or we don't know the final duration, is kind of is a headache for residents in the area. So I appreciate that. I think that some of these challenges stem from the fact that some of the work is done based on very early designs, and so having more cost certainty, certainly on the utility side, would be aided by spending more time upfront in the design, and rather than working off say a 20 to 30% design, advancing to a 60% design allows us to provide more certainty about the construction work. And I think that is a trend that you see in the marketplace generally, is that projects are now spending more time on the front end. And so when they go to bid the construction piece, the construction piece is bid off of a more mature design. So that's, and it's not going strictly to a design bid build, but it is going to a more progressive design build process.
So how can this be avoided in the future?
Generally, it's just going to be more advanced design before some of the planning work is done.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing that comes up a lot in terms of the delay and the fact that there's a lot of overtime, which means night noise, and which is extremely stressful for residents. Is this related to the labor shortage and to COVID? Because certainly it's hard for those that are nearby when people are, when there's work going on day and night.
I would certainly say that our contractors would indicate there is a pressure on resources in Ottawa, that they are relying heavily on out-of-town resources to bolster the project, that they could easily absorb, anywhere between say 300 to 400 more construction laborers, just kind of the snap of the fingers, that there are a lot of people flying in from other parts of the country to support the project. It certainly, you know, some of the closures in Omicron early in the year did not help their cause at all. You know, they've been, you know, I don't want to say it's all that, or I don't know for 100% that's the case in all instances, but, you know, certainly other impacts like the big storm that we just had, you know, Hydro Ottawa, who is a key partner on this project for us, was unavailable for a period of time, you know, rightfully so. The truck convoy, you know, concrete trucks wouldn't deliver during that period. We couldn't get paid duty officers to help us with traffic signal design. Those things add up. And so there are a number of impacts, and we're looking at all of them, and those are all contributing to the delays.
Thank you. I think it's a really tough one, because we're asking residents to put up with more based on this, because then, you know, you've got the same workers working day and night, which I think is problematic in terms of their workload as well, and the delays. So hopefully we can tackle this so the project can move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's been driven home very well that the budget was set really way too early on in the design process. I don't think that we need reminding that this is the project that came in $1 million. Well, it's actually $1 billion over budget. Am I accurate in remembering that? I think that news was delivered in council chambers. Tell me if I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that was the figure. So, so we're looking at $60 million more. So I'm going through the report and I see when we were questioning the design initially, I was hoping to see some of these stations on the Trillium line heading into Riverside South be beefed up a little bit, given that this is a winter city, and was told that the design of the stations, you know, that they could not be changed at all. But I see here in the report that there's actually Leitrim Station is seeing some, you know, some design changes, and Limebank as well. That was news to me. I hadn't heard any of these that they had been changed. I'm just wondering, Mr. Morgan, if you can tell me exactly what was changed in the design at Leitrim Station and at Limebank?
Yep. So I absolutely can. So typically I thought everyone was included on this, but so Leitrim and Bozo Station, and I just want to make sure you're clear that for Leitrim and Bozo, there was a no cost change. It's just shown here because typically we provide notice of the change. At those two stations, the preliminary design had a long ramp and a single elevator to access the platform. And so the ramp was deemed to be cost prohibitive to have in place. And so TNext has replaced the ramp and put in redundant elevators at those two locations. And so at the end of the day, this project team feels that that's a much better solution, because the length of the ramp to get to the platform level was quite long. And then the other one, so Limebank Station, there was an early design that we saw that the team was satisfied with, and there was a bit of an overhang that provided, as you say, some additional bolstering of the platform coverage, and so we did do a variation to retain that additional platform coverage to provide a bit better protection at that location, because it is a pretty isolated location, and the station is quite high up in the air.
Yeah. So, what was the cost of the Leitrim-Bowesville design change?
So Leitrim Bowesville, there was no cost.
No cost. And Limebank?
Limebank, I'll have to get that number for you, but I think I can re-forward the original document that was shared.
So there.
I think, Councillor, sorry, I believe the number is 3.1 million. Our Councillor Meehan, and I believe also the policy is that when there are changes, the ward councillor and the mayor sign off. And my understanding is you signed off on these.
Yeah, I probably had. It's quite a while ago, but I wanted to just go over it again. Thank you. But this wouldn't have affected the 60 million, right? This has already been covered.
Correct. That's already, it's part of the existing spend against the contingency.
Okay. Okay, then I guess what I'm saying is we have very little choice, I think, here. We have to approve the 16 million. Otherwise, we're not going to see the completion of LRT stage 2. Isn't that right?
There would be challenges and other changes that are problematic, yes.
And everything that we've detailed here going forward is absolutely necessary?
Yeah, so we've committed to these things on the utility side. They're absolutely necessary. On the scope side, you know, we've done everything that we thought was reasonable to protect the service. You know, I think the first category of items is really meant to ensure the reliability of the systems when they're handed over. There's a section where, you know, we had, you know, for example, Transport Canada initiated a change where they required locomotive video and voice recorders on board the trains. You know, that's going to cost us $2 to $3 million. We have no choice. You know, that's a regulatory requirement. So we've tried to find the right balance and ensure that we're only spending money on the things that we need to, but at the same time, protecting the service, protecting the connectivity to a few of the key stations, and making sure that when the system is built, it works as expected.
And the peer review that started to be launched, the two companies that you've hired to do this peer review, do we have an estimated cost, and where's that money going to come from?
So that money, I don't recall if it came from our contingency or if it came through our consulting budget, but I think the final number was roughly $600K for that review. And depending on the outcomes of that review, they may identify additional changes that are required.
And those changes, will you be coming back to committee and council with recommended changes?
If they have any, we would bring that back. We would bring back their peer review of the project to committee.
And can you just give us a sense of how that peer review is being conducted?
So they have a series of technical experts that they brought on board. So it's a consortium team of Sistra, which is a major rail construction, design and construction firm, and RATP Dev, which is a major operation and maintainer of rail systems around the world. So those two companies have put together a team of technical experts. They're doing desk exercises where they do paper, you know, basically the review the designs that have submitted. They're following that with a series of interviews of key staff, TNEC staff, as well as city staff in terms of scope and how it's planned to be delivered. And they're going to follow that up with some on-site reviews of the design and the construction activity.
So they're going to be going out and taking a look at the tracks and the buildings, and
correct.
Will they be taking a look at some of the designs of the stations themselves?
You know, they will. You know, from an operations point of view and a maintenance point of view, they certainly will. From a passenger experience point of view, you know, we rely on our customers planning group to do the majority of that type of activity and that type of review. But you know, it's a broad mandate to look at the system and say to the city, tell us, you know, do we have the right strategy here for operating, maintaining? Do we have the right design? Do we have the right construction? Do we have the right approach? Okay,
so but the 60 million was extra was identified before the two companies were brought in for the peer review?
So the 60 is dealing with 35 in additional utility costs on the project, as well as an allocation, basically just replenishing the contingency to protect for potential changes that they would identify, as well as other things that arise over the project.
But we're not saying though that the two companies that were brought in, they're not responsible for suggesting that we need the $60 million.
No.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, on the report is presented. Carried.
Carried.
Councillor Leeper, you held another item 5.
I did. This was the item item 5. We've already determined moved away. I think it was item 11. So item 11 was the
yes, the
parkland policy
funding. Yes, your questions.
Thank you. So my question to staff is, I have been talking a lot in the wake of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan about how we're going to acquire more green space for the urban areas. Obviously, land is extremely expensive. I'm doing some of the best I can with the cash and new funding that we have. Is our urban parkland acquisition strategy going to be more than this report that focuses largely on city land disposal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, definitely the parkland acquisition strategy, and we outlined a lot of the basics of it in the Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan from last year. We recognize the need, especially in the closer you get to the core. We have a deficiency in parkland being provided. We're not meeting our targets. So an acquisition strategy is required to come up with, and there needs to be an awful lot of components that go into that. So it'll come forward in the next term of council. But right now, these two policies that you're looking at are part of the building blocks of that report. This is part of our coming forward with a strategy and a plan that will have legs and some funding associated to it. In addition to what you see here today, it was deferred at planning committee last week, but will be at the next planning committee, is the land first policy, which speaks to, especially in areas where we're in need of, when new developments are coming, to consider land instead of cash in lieu of parkland. That's just a policy to use our rights under the Planning Act as already exists today, but it is taking a current practice and putting it into a formal policy. So that will come forward on July the 7th, I believe. And then next term of council, we're also talking about, and that is in the park dedication bylaw, which was also going up on the 7th. There's just the staff are going to go away and have a fulsome discussion on the distribution of cash in lieu of parkland. We need to have this with the council at the table, with runway to have a discussion about it, which we don't have right now. But to have a discussion about what are our priorities for cash in lieu of parkland funds? We have a citywide fund, we have ward funds. Should we be setting funds aside for acquisition? Many municipalities do that as well. Should we be setting funds aside for other purposes that are of a very big, important social or corporate mandate? So that is the fulsome discussion we're looking to have also in the next term of council. And coming from that is going to be, or is required to be, a parkland acquisition strategy. And in there, I also, as Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Leeper may be aware, that strategy may also look at real estate strategic opportunities as well. We have attempted previously to purchase lands for park purposes, even though the money might be in the bank. Our own policies sometimes get in our way. So it's also a review of our existing policy and procedures so that we can come forward to council with a very comprehensive plan as to how can we try to achieve targets using all the tools in the toolbox instead of just little pieces here and there. Right now, what we're doing is building all those pieces and starting to fill the toolbox so we can come forward with something that is more comprehensive for consideration.
Thank you. I think we all know that the amounts that are going into CIL are going to be insufficient to try to meet targets, which in the urban areas imply the acquisition of land that may be very expensive. So I'm pleased to hear that all of these different components are a part of it. Are we going to go outside that CIL envelope and take a look at funding strategies outside of CIL and parkland dedication?
Well, and yes, absolutely. So this is one of those strategies, because this doesn't involve development dollars, in the sense that this is not money that's come to us through CIL or lands that have come to us through new park development, or new applications for, say, site plan approval or subdivision development. This is actually using the city's own resources to acquire lands for park purposes when we have to make changes to our existing land portfolio in the first place. It's about keeping recreation dollars into a recreation component, but it's also about apportioning our own resources beyond what CIL and development dollars can do. This was an important point in our discussions with the development industry, to show that the city, in good faith, is also coming forward with some of its own strategy to deal with parks and facilities development beyond simply developer supported or developer funded.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm also really pleased to hear that we're going to address some of the real estate hurdles that we might be running against. You and I were unsuccessful in acquiring a parcel over the Christmas holidays. It looks like we're going to be successful in acquiring a parcel on the open market now, but addressing those hurdles is going to be important, and I'll be keen to see that discussion when you do come forward in the next term of council with a parkland acquisition strategy that is wider. And thank you for the answers today. I can go back to the community and say, this is not the parkland acquisition strategy that is still
Correct.
to come.
It's the beginnings. It's just a building block for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. On the report as presented, adopté, carried. Notice the motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. Councillor Gower, I believe, has one.
I do. I'm not sure if the clerk's has it handy, or I can quickly try to find it here.
There you go. It's coming up on screen right now.
Perfect. So this is a notice of motion. Again, Councillor Moffat was going to introduce this, but couldn't be here today. So whereas Tartan Homes registered a plan of subdivision OC 2424154 known as Edenwild on November 16, 2021, and whereas a large hydro corridor was dedicated to the city as part of the registration that did not count as parkland dedication, and whereas a number of blocks were identified and protected within the hydro corridor to provide streets to service and make efficient use of the subdivision lands, and whereas one street block was omitted and not protected for in the plan, and whereas once the property is owned by the city, our disposal policies would apply that would require us to sell the roadblock back to the developer at fair market value in order for them to include it as a roadblock. Therefore, be it resolved that the disposal of real property policy be waived to enable the city to transfer a portion of the hydro corridor to accommodate either a public or private road back to Tartan Homes for a nominal charge.
Okay, thank you. Any other notice the motion? Okay, adjournment. Motion to adjourn, carried. Next meeting is September 6th, and the debenture meeting will take place chaired by Councillor Dudas. Following the FEDCO meeting, the Zoom meeting details are the same as the FEDCO meeting details. So thank you. The meeting adjourned. Happy Canada Day, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For those who are staying for the debenture committee, there'll be approximately 5 minutes while we reboot the live stream, but members can remain on this.